You're older than me. Robin, so Robin and you.
Oh,
and
hush up.
Then I'm probably next. Oh, no, Larry, then Robin and you.
Gotta nail her. See,
She's a baby.
you hear what she
Charles
said
is a
over here?
baby.
you're both older than me. I feel 100 though right now. I know. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our land use meeting of November the 3rd. Can you believe it? November already, 2016. Before we start the meeting, just a couple of things. The Pledge of Public Conduct, very important. I understand the newspapers love it. We may disagree, but we will be respectful of one another. We will direct all comments to issues, and we will avoid personal attacks. And when I say that, it doesn't have to be an attack on the board here. It could be even, some of you sitting in the audience. We just need to remember to always be respectful to one another. And as long as we are, the meeting will move forward as quickly as we can possibly do it. That being said, we'll go ahead and start off with our invocation with Pastor Bernard Scott of Bayside Community Church.
Let's pray. Father, thank you for this day. We honor you and understand that, God, it is your grace that is needed today, for it is sufficient for us. And so I ask that you would provide the wisdom, the strength that is needed today to help your servants, God, to accomplish and make fruitful and be productive. We honor you and we thank you for it. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 And the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Nicole, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, there are. There's one announcement that item number 10, which is resolution R16036, this item is to be heard as the first item on the advertised public hearings. And then there are 4 updates to the memo. Number 4, PDR 1511 ZP Gigliotti, the Floridian at Moccasin. There are corrections to the staff report, revisions to the stipulations, and a revised recommended motion. Item number 7, LDCT 1606, Ordinance 1631, Land Development Code Text Amendment. The ordinance was omitted from an E-agenda, so you have it there in front of you. Item number 9, LDCT 1602, Ordinance 1606, Land Development Code Text Amendment, Urban Cores Amendments. There's an additional public comment letter attached. And item number 10, which is resolution R16036, to incorporate a complete streets section into the Public Works, Highway, and Traffic Standards Manual. This is a revision to the motion, which is in your packet. This concludes the changes.
All right, thank you, Nicole. Also, I want to go ahead and announce that Commissioner DiSabatino is joining us today by phone. Commissioner, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right,
Thank you.
can you hear us okay?
Yes, my mother's doing well. Thank you.
Thank you. That was my next question. How'd you know?
Excuse me, Madam Chair, can we also ask Commissioner if she can see the meeting, view the meeting?
Commissioner?
Yes, I'm looking at you on my iPad and listening from my iPhone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Robin, and we're glad to hear your mom is doing okay.
Thank you. I'll put you back on mute.
Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead at this point. We're going to citizens' comments for consideration for future agenda items. I have no cards before me, so if there's anyone from the public that would like to come forward, please do so at this time on future agenda items. All right, no one's racing to get up here this morning. All right, thank you. We'll close public comment. We'll go ahead. We have one agenda item today. It is item number 3. Does anyone want that item pulled from consent? I am assuming not, and there's no comments. We'll go ahead and open this to public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to come forward on item number 3? All right, not seeing anyone. We will close public comment.
Motion to approve consent agenda?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Chappie, a second by Commissioner Buzzell. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Aye.
Thank you, Robin. It is approved unanimously. All right, wow. Moving right along. We don't have any advisory board appointments today, so we're going to go straight to advertised public hearings. And Nicole, it's my understanding that you want to do item 10 first? Is that correct?
After presentations upon request, so items 4, 5, 6, and 7 are on presentations upon
Okay.
request.
All right. Item number 4, would you read that in, please?
Swearing in.
If you're planning on speaking today, would you please stand and be sworn in? Guess I better get my list.
Do you swear or affirm that the factual statements and factual representations which you're about to present to this board will be truthful and accurate? Thank you.
Item number 4, PDR 1511 ZP, Gigliotti, the Floridian at Moccasin. This is a request of rezone approximately 60 acres on the south side of Moccasin Wallow Road, approximately 1.75 miles east of I-75 Moccasin Wallow Interchange, and commonly known as 9009 Moccasin Wallow Road, from general agriculture to planned development residential, and approving a preliminary site plan for 306 multifamily residential units.
All right, this is a quasi-judicial item, so I'm going to ask, has there been any ex parte communication on this item?
No.
That being said, do we need a full presentation on this? Anyone?
Just, maybe staff could just do a synopsis, but that's it. I don't want a presentation for the public.
Brandon, it's your turn.
Good morning. My name is Brandon Rowe. I'm with Building Development Services. I'm the case planner for this project, and I've been sworn. The proposed project is the second portion of a larger project. Earlier in the year, we had a comprehensive plan amendment come through that changed the future land use from UF3 to Res 6. The site is adjacent to a large area of mixed use. I'm going to put that map up on the doc cam real quick just to give an idea of where we are. So again, there's a large portion of this area that's in the future land use of mixed use. The area outlined in blue is the subject parcel. That's Res 6, and to the east and north of that is the UF3 future land use. The application at hand today is the rezone to planned development residential for 306 multifamily residential units. The application went through the review process. All outstanding issues were resolved. The application has required specific or special approval that was warranted, and the applicant has requested for their amenity center to be granted a height increase that exceeds 35 feet. It's approximately 41 feet, 41 to 43 feet, I'm sorry. And that is the only structure that will be granted a height increase should you move to allow that today. And that building is located interior to the site. The site plan is a little big, so it's a little difficult to show, but it's nestled inside the site, so it's not adjacent to Moccasin Wallow or adjacent to any of the other properties in the area. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you.
I do have a couple of commissioners on the board. Commissioner Chappie?
Brandon, if you could just to get on the record with the preliminary school concurrency analysis, you want to just state that so it's on the record?
Yes. So at the preliminary site plan stage, concurrency for schools are not granted. They get a preliminary letter from the school board. At final site plan, they will have to request for concurrency with the school district. If there's not capacity at that time, they'll either have to defer approval of that project and moving forward with that project, or enter into an agreement with the school district to pay the proportionate share. Clark Davis may be able to answer any more detailed questions if you have them. But
That's good. I just thought it'd be important to put on the record. The other comment I want to make is, like most of the other projects in this area and throughout the county, this project, and you had mentioned it earlier, does propose a pool and the amenities. And I just think it's an important thing to note, considering things that are happening and discussions that are going on. So thank you.
Commissioner Benak?
Yeah, this project is in an area of significant development trends. We have a DRI, proposed DRI that's next door, as I understand it. Many developments have been approved, and I hope, and I mentioned this to Clark in my briefing, that as we go forward, recognizing the significant amount of development that's in this area, that we need to get Moccasin Wallow in the plan for the improvements. And as I said in my briefing, back in the good old days, we used to be able to get development agreements and get impact fees paid up front, and the developers were able to lock in the impact fees so that we could have a funding source to build these roads and not wait piecemeal as each development comes along. So I hope that's something that we will be encouraging and looking at as these developments move forward. I know it's a little bit tougher when they're not DRIs, when they're smaller projects, but it's something that I'm going to put out there. You know, all of these things are on the books now and not built, but it would be a way to get these road improvements sooner rather than later so that we don't have to, you know, put things in like a median and an access turn lane and then tear it up. So I'm going to encourage everyone to, and us too, to try to pull these together so up front we have a plan that we can implement as these projects come online. So.
Good comment. Very good comment. Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Commissioner Benak comment, you know, she's absolutely correct. I was on Moccasin Willow Road about 6:45 a.m. and leaving the Circle K, and you wouldn't believe the traffic jam that's taking place, and even without development. As she mentioned, we got several projects in that area that we have approved. We've got a 2-lane road, and it actually took me to make a turn onto Moccasin Willow Road about 10 minutes just to make that turn. People's trying to get to the school. As soon as I got on the interstate was backed all the way up. And we got new development taking place that have not even been developed yet, so she's absolutely correct. We're going to have to do something quick and fast for that area. It seems to me, we don't have a light there, like we can't put a light, there's one right on there, Old 41. It just has to be some type of work that's done on that road, because if you make that turn into the school, there's a whole line of people coming that's backing all the way up to the light now. So that's something that we must address. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You know, to add to what you just said, I've seen traffic backed up at that intersection at all different times.
And y'all talk about.
So there is.
Moccasin Willow Road, the new Circle K,
Yeah,
At
the
41.
Circle K.
at 41.
41.
Yeah.
Commissioner Benak?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Clark, because this site, of course, is way east of there.
Correct.
And there's planned improvements, as I understand it, on that section to the west of I-75, but not necessarily east. Could you just comment on that? Because I know we talked about it in my briefing.
Good morning. For the record, Clark Davis, Transportation Planning Division Manager, and I have been sworn. Moccasin Wallow Road on our long-range plan, so this is just what we intend to do eventually, not what's funded, is a 6-lane road to be built on a 150-foot wide right-of-way from 41 to 301, so both sides of the interstate. There have been projects in the past that we've requested state and federal assistance for on the section west of the interstate because it seems to be growing faster, and the interaction with the interstate itself, and US 41 has been contributing to traffic there. And a sort of a higher priority planned project, Moccasin Wallow Road, west of the interstate, the section that Commissioner Smith was referencing, is it's hard to say what will happen because some of it is dependent on what happens with the surtax referendum and when we can program projects if it passes. But it is in that list. It would be one of those projects that would likely be jointly funded with surtax and impact fees because there is a growth component to widening the road. But it's sort of higher on the priority list is the best way to put it. There's nothing programmed for it right now.
Commissioner DeSabatino, did you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. We're on the same wavelength today. Yeah, thank you for setting this up, by the way. Thank you, Diane and Marianne. And thank you to staff for changing it, because I had a question a couple days ago about the percentage of open space that was incorrect on our original information. And now that's been changed for the open space. I have a question, a couple questions, if you might. If they're planning to widen Moccasin Wallow, is there sufficient right-of-way set aside on this project for that?
Good morning. For Commissioner DeSabatino's benefit, we're actually talking about two different pieces of Moccasin Wallow. West of the interstate is a portion that's higher priority and has some potential for funding in near term or midterm. East of the interstate, there are no programmed improvements. There are several approved but not yet built developments. I mean, you can think of the list: Robinson Gateway, Eagle Point, Villages of Amazon South, Summer Woods. Copperstone is building. It's one of the few along the corridor that is. All of those have required improvements at intersections, one or more of the intersections along that stretch, but no one has a requirement to build additional lanes along there. For this specific project, for the Floridian at Moccasin Wallow, they have 3 access points proposed. The center and primary access is sort of a boulevard entrance to the project. Will have all turning movement supported there, and they will develop a median to construct left turn lanes for it, but any other access points they have will be restricted to right in, right out, so they'll have to have some form of a median or separator along that section at the other access points.
Okay, and I just want, for the record, the applicant has agreed to construct the necessary turn lanes and tapers prior to final build-out?
There is a stipulation in the development order that's proposed for the project that includes a requirement that the separator and the appropriate turn lanes be constructed.
Okay, and it also, going back to what we were talking about regarding the school capacity, it's saying that the Mills has no capacity, Buffalo Creek does, and Palmetto does not. And it looked like they were planning to build this pretty rapidly. If you could just say, what do they have to do if there's no capacity? Do they have to
They just told us.
pay their fair share of a fee, and how's that work?
At this point, what we receive from the school district is what they call the school report. You can think of it as an estimate of the capacity that's remaining. It would put a developer on notice if there were an impending capacity issue. For elementary school capacity, there are districts throughout the county, and while there may not be enough capacity in this district, which is the case, if there is enough capacity in an adjacent district, they can share, if you will. So they will cross that part of the school concurrency hurdle for elementary schools by virtue of having capacity in an adjacent district. For high schools, there is a single countywide district, and the county is currently over capacity on high schools. So at the time they submit for final site plan, if the school district has not constructed a high school or programmed it short term to be constructed, they will have to pay their proportionate share of towards that capacity before they can be approved.
Right, and it's just a shame because, we talk about all the traffic on the road, and this development will be near the school, the elementary school at least, and they can't walk to school or take their little bikes because there's no capacity there. So, we're all in this dilemma countywide, so it's just a sign of the times, I guess.
Is that all, Commissioner?
That is it for now. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Getting back to Moccasin Willow Road, 41 east and west, let's go into the interstate. I know you said that it's not really set for widening of the road all the way down to Moccasin Willow Road. let's deal with the issue of going into Parish on Marks and Willow Road. I think we approved 2 developments. This will be the 3rd development in that area. There's no capacity for anybody to walk to that school because of the road. There's no sidewalks. My question is, are we encouraging development because whether we have a plan for widening the road all the way, there's going to come a time, maybe 5 or 6 years, that you're going to need to do that. So dealing with our setbacks, we're not having development to build close on the road. Are we encouraging them that it may be a future widening of that road? I know Sarasota ran into difficulties on Fruitville Road where they building highways right beside windows because they had to widen the road and they approved development, knowing that they didn't have the money at the time, but 6 years later they had to widen the roads. So are we kind of discussing that with development?
Yes, sir. Our code requirement in the past, we would require dedication for the right-of-way needed for the future road. Things have changed a little bit, and we still can require dedication from time to time if they need it to implement a site-related improvement or for concurrency purposes. But even if they don't have to dedicate, they still have to do what we call providing a future right-of-way setback on their property. And so it's like the other setbacks and buffers that you have on a property. So they start from the property line and step back, and their development starts once they've accounted for all of those. And one of the things that they account for is the future right-of-way consistent with our thoroughfare plan. So we should not, in theory, encounter that difficulty. Of course, there'll be some older developments that weren't subject to that, and things like that will be more challenging.
I'm stating that because if you look at 17th Street East and Palmetto, as you go across the Canal Road, we allow people to build houses right up on the road, and it's a one-way road. And we need to widen that road now, heading out Ellen Gillette Road, but we should have never allowed them to build on the road because you have to take that whole lane of houses out. So I just don't want us to make that mistake on Marks and Willow Road of allowing development to be close where, 10 years or 6 years or whatever it may be, you have to take out a whole row of houses to put the infrastructure in that's needed, sidewalks and things like that. Because certainly it's going to become a time where children, which they can't now, actually walk to that school, so most everybody's driving them in vehicles, what I see. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Welcome, Commissioner Whitmore.
I can about guarantee those large swales on Canal Road, if that ever happens, we'll be covering them, sidewalks, widening the roads, because they're like, some of them look like they're 7 or 8 feet deep.
Same thing on Waterline.
Someday, hopefully, that'll happen. But as far as on Moccasin Wallow, did something change? Because this weekend, when I went through my agenda, I had, and it looks like it still is, the open space is 68%, correct? 5.86 acres. Brandon?
Yeah, that was a typo in the staff report. In the update memo that was provided, it was revised. And on the sheet that was involved or included in your update memo, it says that there's a typographical error on page 3. The figures shown are incorrect and should read open space required 25%, which would be 14.92 acres for the project, and open space provided is 46.6%, which is approximately 27.89 acres.
So you had no way of changing it on the online? Because I'm looking at your online agenda, the staff report, and it still says site design details 68%. So somebody may want to just look at that. And the school issues that you're talking about on Moccasin Wallow, and you've already reiterated that. If they can't meet it at the final site plan, they will either not build or they have to pay their proportionate share, which I hear is lots and lots of money. So, and that's all we can require because that's a separate entity, that's a separate body, correct? Okay. All right, thanks.
Commissioner Benak.
Yeah, I'm glad you answered that. It's a little bit different terminology than I guess I'm used to about right-of-way reservation. Now you're calling it a right-of-way setback. The reality is that the right-of-way for the future, this site when developed will not impede the future development of the roadway to our master plan. Is that what the right-of-way setback is for, Clark?
That is the intent of the future right-of-way setback provisions.
Because we used to call it right-of-way reservation as opposed to dedication because there's no planned improvement. So I had not heard that right-of-way setback. So that's basically, the site plan accommodates the future right-of-way.
Yes.
Okay. The other thing that I keep hearing is about a school. I don't know of any school. Is there a school within 2 miles of the site?
I don't believe so. I think there has been some references to the elementary and middle school down on
Elementary school.
69th.
And no
And so
sidewalk.
That Mills Elementary School is not on Moccasin Wallow. It's on Erie,
Correct.
probably
Right.
more than 2 miles. No one will ever, unless a new elementary school goes at the parish DRI, there is no elementary school within walking or bike riding distance of this site that I know of.
Currently, I don't believe that there are. I mean, odds are over time they would need an elementary school in the area, just given the sheer amount of dwelling units they have there, but we've not had that discussion with the school district, so as far as I know, they.
I think wasn't there one of those projects, Summer Woods, or one of those projects had a school site at one time? Is anybody familiar with
It
that?
was a school site.
I can't remember, but there's not Mills Elementary is on Erie Road, and it's quite a distance from this site. There's no,
Right. And today, there's not a lot of dwelling units out there, and
Right.
so it still has a lot of its rural character, but as it becomes more suburban, the commissioner's point is still well made that we do need the pedestrian and bicycle facilities. We need to make it a modern facility that's right for the type of development that's coming, and so
And
it
are
will
they
be needed eventually.
are they proposing those with this site plan approval? Are they proposing to build all the sidewalks that are required by our code?
As my understanding is they're building it fully compliant with code, so there should be internal and adjacent street sidewalks.
Thank you.
Ms. County Attorney, do you want
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just wanted to point out, we've gone beyond a mere overview of the project. We've asked Mr. Davis and staff questions that really the applicant should really be answering in terms of whether they agree to stipulations or agree to setbacks. So I would ask you to open the hearing to enable the applicant to address the board if they wish to.
All right, we'll go ahead and do that. The applicant presentation, please.
Oh, we didn't ask for a presentation,
Just
did we?
questions.
Oh,
Well,
okay, it was
questions.
just question.
Well, Madam Chair, the applicant has legal right to present, so we
Yeah.
need to leave up to them what they say.
Madam Chair, Patricia Petra, for the record, I have been sworn. I represent the applicant. I will keep this brief. We have worked very closely with your staff. We appreciate all the cooperation. We agreed to all the stipulations, including the one in your supplemental memo. We have reserved the right-of-way. I agree with Commissioner Benak. That was a new word for me, too, today, the right-of-way setback. But we understand what the comprehensive plan says, and we were very careful to reserve the right-of-way. We are doing the appropriate intersection improvements. There is a stipulation which addresses that specifically for this project to make sure that the additional entrances besides the main entrance are right in, right out, so we don't have those turning movements that sometimes can be so dangerous. I understand the school issue intimately. Because my firm, of course, represents the school district. There is a draft agreement that has been circulated to collect those school fees for the developments that find themselves in that timeframe when the school district does not yet have the plan for the high school. The school district is moving forward somewhat rapidly for the plan for that high school. I will also tell you that the demographic for this project is active seniors. So we have not yet made the federal decision of whether to designate it as a 55-plus. If we do take that step, that alleviates that high school issue. And so I just want to tell you that right now, the thought process is active seniors, and that this apartment complex rental unit will be something that will be, based on our research, a very interesting project or project of interest to that demographic. Happy to answer any other questions, but we do agree with the staff and the staff report and the stipulations.
Commissioner Whitmore.
Patty, just one question. There's a new development behind Oyster Bar on 41, Discovery Villages of Sarasota Bay. It's totally rental for the age appropriate, like you're saying, it's almost has 100 filled already, and it's 120 bed facility apartments. So not everybody wants to buy. And is that what you're thinking
This
about?
is rental. This
Yeah,
is
right,
rental.
exactly. People don't want to buy that much anymore. They would rather just rent and just, and it filled like in 2 months. So I was shocked because, again, you build like what the market calls for. So I'm kind of happy to see something in North County, because this filled in South County and in New York second. I was shocked. So
Thank you.
thanks.
Any other questions, commissioners? Commissioner DeSabatino, you have any questions for the applicant?
Yes, I wanted to correct my statement regarding walking to the elementary school. I meant driving further, so they have to drive further if they can't go to this school. Also, with this right-of-way, I guess, what are you calling, setbacks or reservation, I just wanted to clarify, does the county have to pay if they want to widen later, or this is dedicated now? And then I applaud them for the rental units, because so many families, young families,
It's elders.
want to rent, and they don't want to necessarily buy, and they want something affordable, so they are meeting the market. That's all. Thank you.
All right, any other questions for the applicant?
I'm not sure I can answer Commissioner DeSabatino's question. My understanding is that if and when the county requires that right-of-way, there's a system in place for either some impact fee credits or a level on the purchase price, but that's really a Mr. Davis question.
Ms. Petroff, if I could ask one question, I just want to, from what Commissioner DeSabatino just said, it's not for sure yet, is it, that it will be 55 plus?
No, that's a federal, it's not something in your code. It's a federal, a decision that we make, and we register with the federal government, and there's some advertising and marketing and some hoops to go through. So no, the decision has not been made to go that route.
That's what I thought.
But they're
I just
thinking
wanted to
about it.
make sure. Okay,
Clark to respond.
yeah, Clark,
Question.
go ahead.
I'm addressing Commissioner Sabatino's question regarding the right-of-way. When a future right-of-way setback is required, it's just that. It's a setback. It remains the property of the developer. When the county designs the road and decides what amount of that they need, they will approach them and acquire the right-of-way like they would for any other road project. What this does is it keeps that portion of the future right-of-way structure-free. No buildings in it, no parking, and no site-related drainage, stormwater facilities.
Clark?
Yes.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Robin.
Okay. Just a question regarding this, just circling back to the school capacity, and if by chance the parents have to drive their kids to another school further away, it's a school issue. Do the parents have access to the children taking a bus to the distant school, or do they have to drive them?
Why don't you ask the applicant? Maybe the
Yeah,
applicant might know better since you
Attorney
represent.
How the
for the
school
school
district
board.
works their logistics
She's
and
right
topic.
Right behind you.
I'm sorry.
First of all, there is a school site reserved on the Artisan Lakes project,
There was one somewhere.
and that, I believe, was supposed to be an elementary school. At one point in time, there was a school site reserved on the Curiosity Creek project, but that project, PSP, I think, has expired, so I don't know the status of that. With respect to busing, my understanding is that if the school site is more than 2 miles away,
Have to have a bus.
their children are bused, or if there is some inherent danger, for instance, walking along a 6-lane highway, the students can be bused if it's less than 2 miles away. So it's safety first for the children.
Are there any more questions, commissioners?
Nope.
Yes, that didn't quite answer my question. if they have to go to a different school outside of their zone, does the busing system accommodate that?
Well, that would be more of a question for the school board, and I think, that's kind of standard operation. As this thing progresses, that's going to be all worked out with the school board and with the development. It's not something that I don't think we can answer at this time, or even should. It's a school board issue. They'll provide the busing that's needed.
She represents.
Commissioner
Okay,
Benak.
maybe in the future we can get some statements from the school board that these communities that we're approving, that the children will get busing provided if they have to go out of their area. Thank you.
Commissioner Benak.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, the reality is, the school board provides busing for
Right.
students if
Right.
it's beyond 2 miles.
Right.
Rules.
And if the school board redistricts, because one school is over capacity, they'll provide busing to the districted school. I don't understand Commissioner DeSabatino's question.
Well, I think
If the
it's,
school board redistricts, clearly they continue to provide busing. They don't say, oh,
And-
you
and-
redistricted, now you need to walk 5 miles. I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
and Commissioner Benak and Commissioner DeSabatino, I think that's kind of what I was saying. The school board will work this out with the development as it progresses. This isn't something that we need to answer. We know the schools are going to be providing busing where it's required and necessary. So did you have anything else you wanted to add, Commissioner DeSabatino? Hello?
Yeah, it wouldn't be necessarily a school-wide redistricting. It would be a select few, because you would have some that are already going that are in a nearby community.
Commissioner, do you have a question for the applicant?
No, that's
Okay.
all. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, I'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. If anybody in the audience like to comment with regards to this issue, please come forward at this time. I believe, do we have any? We don't have any?
No.
And I'm now turning it back over to our chairman, Commissioner Ball.
I could hear the whole thing when I was in the back. Wow. No one from the public coming forward? All right, we will close public comment at this point. Any other questions, commissioners? All right, what is the pleasure of the board?
I'll
We do
make,
have, just so you know, we do have a revised motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the revised recommended motion.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Whitmore, second by Commissioner Chappie. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Commissioner DeSabatino.
Aye, kicking and screaming. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand you.
Screaming, she said aye.
Oh,
Aye.
you said aye, okay.
Aye, oh, never mind.
It is approved unanimously. Thank you. All right, next, Nicole, number 5.
Yes, item number 5 is PDR 1608ZP. This is Wyndham Development at State Road 70 and Lorraine Road. It's a rezone of approximately 41.5 acres located on the west side of Lorraine Road and north of State Road 70, from general agriculture to planned development residential, and a preliminary site plan for 139 single-family detached residents.
All right. And I'm going to ask, has there been any ex parte communication on this item?
Nope.
No. All right, not seeing any. We'll move forward. I don't know, Lisa, who is the applicant on this?
Rosina's the case planner.
All right.
If we want a
Rosina,
presentation.
you want to, do we need a full presentation on this?
Nope.
No?
Okay. Rosina?
Good morning, Rosina Leider, by the staff. The advertisement says, the applicant is asking to rezone the site from A to PDR and is proposing 139 residential detached units. The applicant is asking one specific approval to provide a variable width buffer, greenbelt buffer in one portion of the site. And a special approval is required for exceed 1 dwelling units per acre net density, and for be located with the watershed and the special treatment. The applicant complied with all the regulations. We didn't get any negative comment from any neighbors. staff believe that the proposed lot size and density is in compliance and comparable with the adjacent properties. The site is adjacent to the northwest sector, and the parcel that is exactly to the west will be, is zoning, no zoning, is zoning PDMU, and is intended for residential, including multifamily. If you have any particular questions,
Commissioner Benak?
Yeah, I just want some for the public clarification on the variable width buffer. Why is staff recommending approval of the variable width buffer?
because there are you going to address?
Joel Christian for Planning Department staff, and I've been sworn. The location of the variable width buffer is along the entrance road that was aligned with the road or driveway across the street. So that location pushed it up a little bit, and it clips where that 15-foot greenbelt buffer would be. They've proposed to do a fence in that location to help provide that screening from cars turning in and that kind of thing from the adjacent property.
So it's just for a limited amount of
Very
linear
short.
feet along the, I guess, northern property line there? Is that right?
Yes.
Small amount.
Small amount, okay.
It's a small amount.
Okay.
All right. Commissioner Whitmore?
And, when you see a project out in Lakewood Ranch, they've had their infrastructure in since the 80s. So when I see something like this, I see the shopping centers to the south of it, no complaints, nothing's around it. This is a natural progression of the growth that you're seeing out there. And it's going to, when things come before us and it's changed, because the market's changed, I'm glad they're going to have mixed use out there, and I have no problems at all with it. But if you look at the surrounding areas and you didn't have one objection, it's because most people out there knows that as the market demands, there will be changes and they will rework things. Since the 80s, and I've said this, I was involved with the CON of Lakewood Ranch Hospital when they built that, and there's plans, in the future for residents over 50,000 on both sides, Manatee and Sarasota side. So at least they're not just building something and waiting for the customers. To me, they're waiting to the markets, and I've noticed that for many years now. So I totally support it, and I'm glad they do it like this, and wait and just don't build something, and most don't because of the markets. But this to me is a natural progression.
I just want to comment on that, number one, I go by this area all the time. I was there yesterday, went by it. And this actually, just for the record, is not actually part of Lakewood Ranch. It's on the outskirts of Lakewood Ranch, and I just wanted to make sure that the public, knew that, because that's truly the case.
I made a mistake.
No,
I always
I
assumed
just,
it
a
was.
lot of people do.
Yeah.
They automatically think it's Lakewood Ranch because it's so close, but that's why I just wanted to mention that it's actually not, but you can still call it Lakewood Ranch. It's close enough.
Shoot, they call the shopping,
The shopping centers like Lakewood
where
Ranch.
the Ranch Grill is.
car
Operation-
dealership.
And Nick and Mo's.
That's on
Yeah.
64.
That's on 64. That's way
Lakewood
far
Ranch
from
Operations
Lakewood Ranch.
Facilities right next to it, so
But that's okay. We'll take it all.
it's the
Ranch.
outskirts of it.
All right. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to go ahead. Does the applicant want to add anything before we go to public comment?
Hi, good morning. My name is Rachel Layton. I'm with ZNS Engineering, and I have been sworn this morning. I'm here on behalf of the applicant requesting approval today of the rezone to PDR with the one specific approval and the special approvals that were required. We do have two future land use categories on this, so it made it a little bit different going through the process. We are not in the stewardship district for Lakewood Ranch. We're just kind of outside that boundary.
Might let you be, though. I'm kidding.
But we've worked well with staff, and we're in support of all the stipulations that have been proposed this morning. I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Not seeing anyone on the board. We'll go ahead now and open this to public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to come forward? All right, not seeing anyone. What's the pleasure of the board?
I move the recommended motion.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Benak, a second by Commissioner Bustle. All in favor, say aye.
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 Good, all right, it is approved unanimously, thank you. All right, moving right along, number 6. Nicole?
Item number 6 is Z1605 Robe 2 LLC. This is a rezone of approximately 1.95 acres on the west side of Zipperer Road, approximately 2,500 feet north of State Road 64, commonly known as 1504 Zipperer Road, from general ag to suburban agricultural zoning district.
Right. Commissioners, this is also quasi-judicial. Has there been any ex parte communication? All right, I am seeing a no. We'll go ahead and move forward. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Madam Chair and other members of the Board of County Commissioners. I am Stephanie Moreland, and I have been sworn. Ms. Knapp already read the introduction of the project. It is a straight rezone from the A General Agricultural Zoning District, which allows one dwelling unit per 5 acres, to the A1, which is suburban agriculture, and that allows one dwelling unit per 1 acre. And the site is north of State Road 64, on the west side of Zipperer Road. And if you know where Bayside Community Church is, that is where the Zipperer Road is, just opposite of that area. That is our aerial, and this is the site here. The site is 1.95 acres. It's a division of a 15.99 acre parcel, and there are other properties along Zipperer Road that already have the A1 zoning district. So we feel that this is compatible. The site is also in the UF3 future land use category. The proposed A1 zoning is consistent with the UF3. And that concludes my little presentation today.
I don't have anyone on the board. I think it's pretty well explained. Would the applicant like to come forward and add anything? Boy,
She's everywhere.
I'm telling you.
I'm 2 in a row this morning.
You are.
Good morning again. I'm Rachel Layton with ZNS Engineering, and I have been sworn. What we were doing here was trying to correct a lot combination for this property. There were 2 parcels originally, and there's 2 legal descriptions that were initially submitted. And what we did during the process was change the rezoning application just to the 1.95 acres so that we can do a lot split and be able to sell the 2 parcels individually. So I wanted to give a little bit of background on why we're pursuing the change from A to A1 for this particular piece of property. It meets the comprehensive plan and the land development code, and I can answer any questions that you might have, but I'd respectfully request your approval this morning of the rezoning request.
I'm waiting. I see no one on the board.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and open this to public comment. Anyone want to come forward, speak on this issue? Not seeing anyone. Commissioner Chappie.
I just wanted to add, right, I just wanted to add for the record, no quasi-judicial. I was out of the room when you asked the question about
No, we
any
didn't.
ex parte.
Oh, ex parte, gotcha.
We
Okay.
didn't have a presentation.
I understand, but I thought it important to declare that.
Okay, well, public comment's closed. So what is the pleasure of the board?
Move approval of the recommended motion.
Second.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Benak, a second by Commissioner Bustle. All in, Commissioner DiSabatino, I'm sorry, I didn't check with you. Are you ready?
Thank you. No.
Okay.
Aye. All in favor, say aye.
All in favor, say aye.
We did.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. It is approved unanimously. Thank you. All right, number 7.
Item number 7 is LDCT 1606, Ordinance 1631. This is a Land Development Code Amendment. It's an ordinance amending Section 402.5 of the Land Development Code, Schedule of Uses for Planned Development District, Table 4-7, to include outdoor storage as a principal use and recreational vehicle parks and subdivisions as permitted uses in the PDMU, Planned Development Mixed Use Zoning District, and amending Section 345, which is special approval process as required by the Comprehensive Plan, Table 3-4.
All right. This is not quasi-judicial, it's legislative. So that being said, does anyone need a presentation on this?
Not on this.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and open public comment on this issue. Anyone like to come forward? Not seeing anyone. We will close public comment. What is the pleasure?
Move the recommended motion.
Commissioner Smith, sorry.
Madam Chair, could we get some kind of brief for the public on what we're actually doing with this item? I would like,
Yeah, come on up. Was trying to push this through.
Point of order, did we second it? Then we're talking?
Not yet, no.
Okay.
We did not.
Good morning, Rosina Leider, the staff. This is the second hearing that is required for a text amendment. As the advertisement says, we are proposing to include with the table the permitted uses in PDMU, the outdoor storage principal use, and recreational vehicle parts. They are the only two uses that are commercial uses that are not allowed in PDMU but are allowed in PDC. PDMU allowed, the intent is to allow the appropriate mixed uses, and staff is trying to provide this opportunity. Also, we are deleting from the special approval table the language that says that all the RV parks have to be rezoned CRB, that is in contradiction with the sections 402.9 of the code that says that recreational vehicle park can be located within the PDRB. This is the only change, is two changes to the tables. And we are not changing any applicable regulations for the plan development or the specific uses.
And as you said, Rosina, the first hearing on this before the county commission was October the 6th.
October the 6th,
Right,
yes.
so this is just the second
Probably, yeah.
public meeting. on
And you hear about that previously when we asked for the authorization to have this meeting in the morning.
that. Commissioner Banat.
Yeah, I just want to clarify too, but if a recreational vehicle park were to be located in a PDMU or PDRV, being planned development, it would require a site plan approval by the board?
Yes, yes, because it's a PDR, and also there are specific regulation with the specific use criteria that they have to meet.
And just want to, for an aside, I know a lot of people are buying RVs nowadays and looking for places to take their RVs, and so it's not surprising. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more requests for RVs. What do you think, Madam Chair?
Well, I can tell you that it is an issue, and it's something that we need to deal with in this county, so I'm glad to see this coming forward. That would only be my answer. Thank you, Rosina. Commissioner Busso, would you like to make your motion again, sir?
Well, it didn't get seconded.
Well, it might this time.
I won't try again.
You don't want to try again?
No, let
All
somebody
right.
else try.
I'll move approval of the recommended motion.
Second?
Second.
So you have
In
three.
3 seconds. Second.
3 seconds.
What's the
All right.
second?
So we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Benak, a second by Commissioner Chappie. All-
Well, just before we vote, I just hope Commissioner Bussell won't take it personal that Benak got 3 seconds and he didn't get any with the same motion. It wasn't personal.
Didn't rule on my motion, so I guess
I did
technically it
ask.
was still on the
She
table.
did ask, you didn't
Yeah, really.
receive a second at the time, because I guess people just weren't ready.
Okay.
Charles wanted to,
That's right,
We still vote.
not my fault. All right, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Aye.
It is approved unanimously. Thank you. Oh, boy. What a tough crowd. Number 8.
Actually, next, Madam, it would be item number 10.
Oh, right, public hearing, yeah.
Number 10 is Resolution R16036 to incorporate a complete street section into the Public Works Highway and Traffic Standards Manual. And I'm going to turn it over to Vishal and Matthew West from Little John, I think.
Welcome, Vishal.
Good morning, Commissioners. The resolution that you have in front of you is for the inclusion of complete streets, if you will, standards, typical sections within the Public Works manual. If you recollect a little bit of history here, in early 2012, Manatee County Health Department got a grant to work on something related to complete streets. They formed a working group. I was part of that group as well, so was John behind me. And based on what the recommendations of the group were, we came in front of the board and we presented our findings. In early 2013, excuse me, based on work group's recommendation, the board adopted basically in our comprehensive plan a policy for complete streets. So now we opened the door that yes, we encourage and we would like to have these in our neighborhood, in our communities. A definition of complete streets, as you know, was added. It's very broad, so it was added in our comprehensive plan. This is essentially the next logical step. So if somebody wants to come right now, they have the definition, they have our desire to do so, but what would they do? They can haphazardly do something, and then we have to operate and maintain that. So what we are doing right now is putting menu of options in Public Works Standards Manual. And this is what this is about, to amend that manual and get the resolution related to that. Now, a couple points to note here are these are not mandatory. We are not going to require a developer who comes in to do this, that you must do this. What we are doing is, if you would like to do it, then these are your menu of options. These are your choices that you should be doing. Similarly, for the staff on the CIP projects, when we do it, now we have those options available, 11-foot lanes and parkings and bikes and all of those things. So that's what it gives us, a logical starting point. And second is, it will be complete streets. When somebody says complete streets, I think the first thing that comes to everyone's mind is bicycles and pedestrians. It is not just that. It is for all modes of transportation, for all users. And I don't want to take thunder from the presentation, but would like to walk away with something here is a corridor like US 301, which is limited access, it is complete because, believe it or not, we don't want pedestrians there. The use for that corridor is to transport goods and vehicles from one point to another. It is not going to be the same as you would call Lakewood Ranch Boulevard or a local street. So it's a context-sensitive solution. So it won't be on every street. It will be on the streets that it will be appropriate, and we will not be mandating that you must follow this. With that, the last point is Planning Commission voted unanimously to adopt this or recommend that board adopt that. I'll turn it over to Matt, and he'll go in detail over the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Matthew West. I'm a senior planner with Littlejohn Engineering Associates, and I'll quickly run through some of the highlights of these standards that we're looking to include in your Public Works Manual. First of all, just to run over if we've got the PowerPoint going.
Maybe.
There we go. And hopefully it'll work. There you go. Here's quickly in the order I want to go through some of the topics to summarize these standards. First, we're going to look at Manatee streets versus complete streets. We're going to quickly discuss why we want to consider complete streets for the county and how to apply those standards. I want to talk briefly about street components of complete streets and a couple of success stories, and then wrap it up to show you where we're placing these standards in the Public Works Manual. So first of all, it was already covered. Basically, this topic has been around for over 4 years at the county, starting back in March 2012, bringing you all the way to this point. We are now talking about, after amending your comp plan and putting the definition of complete streets in it and some policies to encourage it, we're now talking about actually putting these standards, these guidelines in your Public Works Manual. Now, first of all, this is the traditional way that most cities and counties across this country looked at transportation and transportation planning for decades and decades. It's basically how many cars can I fit on a road? How many passenger vehicles can I fit on a road? And Complete Streets wants to take that and not just consider cars, but consider pedestrians, consider transit, consider bicycles, all modes of transportation, and also consider the neighborhoods through which these roads run and the context that it brings to the design. Now, this is some pictures of some, fairly normal Manatee County streets. And as you can see, just like every other community across this country for decades, the consideration is more about accommodating passenger vehicles, whereas these pictures on the right-hand side show a more robust provision of other modes of transportation, accommodations of other modes of transportation. You can see on the right, you've got medians, you've got wide sidewalks, you've got bike lanes, and you've got some on-street parking. So you're accommodating all kinds of things within the right-of-way other than just volumes for passing traffic through. Here's a little photo simulation of what we could do if you applied these standards or guidelines on a particular or a certain road in Manatee County. So here's a picture of what it looks like now, and if you start applying some of these standards, you might start making it a more attractive place, a more pedestrian-friendly place. Now let's take into consideration bicycles, and let's apply this all the way to the other side of the roadway. And that's kind of the result, the vision of Complete Streets when it's put in its proper place, in its proper context. So why Complete Streets? Well, a lot of the goals are to accommodate all types of users of all ages, but a lot of the goals center around safety as well. People aren't going to walk along a road or bike along a road if they don't feel like they're safe. They don't want to cross it if they don't feel like they're safe. It also promotes a healthy community as well. If you provide other modes of transportation other than driving, it's good for the health of the community. One of the things we don't want to do is increase emergency response times. So the design of Complete Streets has to take into consideration emergency response times and the emergency vehicles that you're utilizing. And finally, you want to allow those vehicles to be able to deploy and the personnel to operate on a complete street in an emergency appropriately. Part of the safety aspect is, as we said, a lot of arterials and collectors all over this country in this state are designed about moving cars quickly. And as we can see, statistically, speed kills, especially when you're dealing with cars and pedestrians. And when you think about it, if we reduce the speeds of vehicles and you look at it, fire-related fatalities and fire-related injuries are far fewer than you look at the number of traffic-related fatalities and injuries. So we can reduce those. Our firefighters and our emergency crews will have less incidents to respond to. Here's a little simulation of the volume of different modes of transportation on the same right-of-way. You've got one person in each passenger vehicle on the left, you've got 40 people on a bus, and then you've got 40 bicyclists, and showing how the volume of the roadway or the right-of-way you take up by mode of transportation significantly changes the use of the roadway and the public space. Another essential part of Complete Streets is connectivity. A lot of communities, you only have a couple of north-south arterials or collectors and a couple of east-west, so all your traffic is forced out onto these roads, and which also they become over capacity and also affect your emergency response times. Here's a perfect example. Here's a house here on the left, and here's a house here on the right, and they're in two subdivisions, and if you walked straight from one house to the other as a crow flies, they're 666 feet apart. But because these subdivisions and roadways are not interconnected, it's more like a 3-mile walk or a 4-mile walk. So essentially, part of Complete Streets is if you're going to slow down your traffic on your Complete Streets, then you want to disperse the traffic. You don't want it all forced out onto a road with slower speeds, and you want to have connectivity. Here's another example. A child living in this house on the left wants to walk to school. If they're away to walk directly, they'd only be about a 300-foot walk, but really, in reality, it's over 2 miles because there's no connectivity. There is in Orlando, there's a place called Avalon Park, and there was Billy Hadaway from DOT had a great slide that showed that two houses that basically their backyards backed up to each other was a 7-mile journey if you wanted to, unless you climbed over the wall between the two developments. It was a 7-mile journey from one person to visit another one at houses that backed up to each other. And then there's the economic benefits of complete streets, and I'm going to show you that in more detail in our success stories that are coming up. So how do you apply complete streets? You have to apply it to the context of the neighborhood that the road is running through. You also have to take in consideration the right-of-way width, what you can fit in your right-of-way. There are parking needs, there's budget issues. One of the things that you consider is the timing of these things. As an example, if your utilities or department's getting ready to dig up a road to put in a new water line or a sewer line, that may be appropriate time, because if you're already going to have to tear up the road once, you might as well consider from economies of scale implementing some of these complete street concepts and retrofitting. Here, as was pointed out previously, on the top left photo, and when you look at the context, that's a rural area. So you probably don't need urban, design roadways here, and because of low traffic. But obviously, when you look at some of these other pictures, all the different modes of transportation need to be taken into consideration in complete streets. On your left, here's an example of interconnected roadways, which would help support complete streets. But this also illustrates that what we've always looked at for decades, most everywhere across this country, is once again the capacities and the functional classification of a roadway. And what we should be doing is looking at the context of the neighborhood and the area through which the road is running, whether it's rural, suburban, industrial, urban core. Those things bear on how you design a complete street. And so once again, on the left, how many cars can you fit on the road? On the right, how many modes of transportation can you accommodate in that same right-of-way? So what we came up with in these guidelines are street types based on these contexts of areas through which roadways run. And here's an example of 4 of them that are proposed to be in your manual. Components of streets. Looking at I'm going to start on the right-hand column here. On the bottom right is probably a rural context. You've got a narrower right-of-way. You have lower traffic. Bicycles and vehicles may share a roadway. But on the left-hand side of these cross sections are the more urban areas, your urban cores and your suburban areas, where multiple modes of transportation require accommodation and most likely require more right-of-way. And then in your manual standards that we propose, there's a table of a matrix, basically, of each street type and the different components that would be preferred, not preferred, or optional according to the street type that you're trying to design to. And here are some of those components. On the left-hand side, travel lanes. A lot of places, they have 14, 13, 12-foot wide travel lanes for vehicles. And if you look on this left-hand side, you got 4-lane undivided roadway running. And if you put it on a road diet, and you go from 4 lanes to 3 lanes, so you have a center turn lane, you make room for bike lanes. You can accommodate with that additional width bike lanes. On the right-hand side, you have medians. Median treatments are a component. They help with traffic calming. Medians provide a pedestrian refuge. They also help separate traffic, and they allow for landscaping. And landscaping is an essential part of complete streets, which I'll talk about quickly in the future. Bicycle facilities, there's all kinds of ways to accommodate bicycles. And once again, it's based on the context. Bottom right is a suburban area, so you have a wide multi-use path on the right, whereas some of the ones on the top are in a more urban area where you have less right-of-way, and you might have a share where you share the lane with the cars and bikes, or have a separate bike lane. Sidewalks are an essential component, and of course, as I talked about landscaping, street trees are an essential part of the infrastructure of a complete street. And of course, everybody sees everything from the ground up, but when you put trees in a right-of-way, there's all kinds of things below it you have to take into consideration. And part of this manual also talks about and provides guidance where utilities should be located if you put them in a complete street, and basically, takes into consideration the trees and the landscaping you want to plant in that right-of-way. So when you have this issue, you've got roots from these trees. So part of this manual talks about the correct tree in the correct place. And trees are essential because they provide shade, they provide cooling, they provide an economic benefit. The property values on the adjacent properties go up. And so they add this quality of life that's essential to a complete street. And what you don't want to do is when you plant your trees in there, you have roots conflicting with water and sewer lines and storm drains. uprooting sidewalks and curbs, but there are technologies to deal with that. And once again, the first thing you do is you think about the correct tree and the correct place. If you have a very narrow right-of-way and you have a very small planter area, it's probably more appropriate to put palm trees, which have a small root ball, as opposed to if you have a wider planter area, you might want to consider other types of shade trees. And there are technologies here such as root barriers, structural soils, and structural cells that will help minimize the impact of trees and landscaping on maintaining your other utilities and facilities. But there is a cost to this maintenance. This is going to, when you do a complete street, you have to build in maintenance costs for putting in the landscaping because it does require maintenance. So I want to quickly go over a success story, which our office is located on this street. It's called Edgewater Drive. It's near downtown Orlando. And in 2002, this was a state road. DOT had money to resurface the road. And you can see the top picture was a 4-lane undivided roadway. And this is in an area called College Park, which the houses were built just after World War II, most of them, and the area was starting to rebound and redevelop. And when DOT's plan was just come, we're going to resurface and we're going to restripe it the same way, 4-lane undivided. But the city of Orlando, the business owners on Edgewater Drive, and the homeowners in College Park got together and said, we want to try something different. If you're going to spend the money and lay down this asphalt, can we look at, doing something to make this more pedestrian friendly and more bicycle friendly? So what they did below, as you see, is they put this road on a road diet. They went from 4 lanes to 3, which opened up additional on-street parking and added bike lanes in there. And by doing this, what it did is it dropped the number of car accidents by 40%, the number of injuries by 71%. This was studied over a 10-year period from 2002 to 2012. And the other thing what it did is they examined also the property values over that 10-year period from 2002 to 2012. And the property values of the properties abutting Edgewater Drive went up 80% over those 10 years compared to 50% for the average of the county. So there's a significant economic impact. And in 2002, there was a consideration that went back to the College Park stakeholders and said, do you want to put it back the way it was in 2002? And they said, no, we want you to keep it this way. So this was thoroughly studied by the city of Orlando. The next one I want to show you is a brief video about Gaines Street in Tallahassee, which is another success story for a complete street. And hopefully, hopefully this, no, I got to go back. Can we go back?
They're coming to help you.
I'm not. Oh, the wheel, okay. You're going to run it from there? Yeah. Okay.
"15 years ago, the city of Tallahassee and the community envisioned a new district and destination in the downtown. The proposed plan would create a pedestrian-friendly street, connect 2 universities, and lay the foundation for a vibrant blend of commercial, residential, and cultural uses in the district. Gaines Street was a high-traffic, 4-lane transit corridor of small businesses, warehouses, and vacant lots. The new Gaines Street vision called for a 2-lane pedestrian-scale street to encourage urban vitality and blend the old with new development. The vision called for construction of affordable housing, walkable, transit-oriented development, and retail to support area neighborhoods, the universities, and businesses. Gaines Street's unique new design would include broad sidewalks, signage, lighting, street furniture, and seating walls to create interesting, active urban spaces and define a sense of place. Landscaping, tree preservation, and bioswales would blend new development with surrounding areas and add to the enjoyment of users. Gaines Street was funded with $35.45 million from Leon County and the City of Tallahassee's 10% share of the 2004 sales tax extension, and from the state of Florida, along with the jurisdictional transfer of several roadways within the corridor. $18 million has been spent to date, with the balance allocated for a nearby stormwater, roadway, and linear park project. The new Gaines Street is an effective multimodal link connecting universities, the downtown, and the state capitol. Public transit use in the corridor has doubled. New pedestrian facilities and on-street public parking invite patrons to area businesses, while the reduced 25-mile-per-hour speed limit and shared bicycle lanes create a safe environment for both pedestrians and cyclists. Today, the vision of an 18-hour pedestrian-friendly destination is a reality. The district has attracted private investment that exceeds all expectations. With more than $328 million in new development that will accommodate the needs of 4,500 new area residents and most city-owned parcels sold to private developers, the community's investment has paid off. The success of Gaines Street is a result of collaboration among local government, agencies, and the consultant team, with the cooperation of various stakeholders. Students and faculty returning to the universities this year have found a vibrant new destination at their doorstep as the Tallahassee community embraces the exciting new Gaines Street district.
And as you see here, just like at the Edgewater Drive experience, it's a multi-jurisdictional, multi-agency, collaboration to make these things work. And hopefully this will, there you go. And so just to wrap up, we're placing these optional standards in your Public Works Manual and adding it to what already is there and under your roads section. And then we have a new complete street section that addresses all these issues that I just kind of ran through rather quickly with you. And at this point, I just want to point out that there are a lot of resources out there. And so this information and these guidelines that are being placed or recommended to be placed in your manual are based on a lot of research and a lot of other experts here. And there's some examples of some of the literature that will help support these kind of standards. And with that, I'm available for any questions you may have.
We have a few. Commissioner Bussell.
I think the concept is great, and I think we'll all probably ask why didn't we do it a lot sooner? But leads to my question is, what is the impact of complete streets on cost of a road? Is there a general idea as to how much more it costs to build a complete street as opposed to the traditional way?
I think it's difficult to answer that because, once again, it's going to be based on a situation by situation. Once again, if you're building a brand new road, that may be a different level of comparison than if you're retrofitting like they were doing on Edgewater Drive. So I don't think there's a set formula about the cost differential. What I will do is I'll go back and take a look at that for you, and if you need to, I can forward that information to the commission.
Follow-on question.
Yes.
The concern I have, and I don't know, maybe it'll be answered and taken care of in routine fashion, but we have a pretty expensive capital improvement program of streets, our thoroughfare plan. And it sounds like if we wish to include complete streets in the design of all those roads, particularly the new ones, then we may be adding a considerable amount of cost to our capital improvement program. And that's my concern.
Commissioner Benek.
Yeah, and as I understand it, you said these are not mandatory, but you're providing the standards. Hasn't DOT adopted these standards as well?
Yes.
Okay, so DOT's adopted the standard. I mean, the idea is you have to have a goal, I guess, of what would be a complete street. But even though these standards aren't mandatory, we do have many elements that are in our standard. I call them Green Book standards. I don't know what they're called, the road transportation standards. But we already require, if you're building a new thoroughfare, some of the complete street standards. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe you could talk about what things I mean, already, if somebody's coming in to build, let's say, a segment of like Lakewood Ranch Boulevard, don't we generally require sidewalks and bike lanes and those things?
Correct. Commissioner Benek, John Osborne, planning official. In our current standards, we have sidewalks requirement, 5-foot wide sidewalks, which is the same for everywhere in the county. The same 12-foot wide travel lanes, the same for everywhere in the county. And what this does is it really gives us the opportunity to provide a menu of options. When I worked for Public Works previously, we'd have a developer come in and want to do something maybe a little bit different, maybe 11-foot travel lanes, maybe do a 6-foot wide sidewalk. And we'd have to have this sort of like custom engineering conversation over multiple meetings to get that cross-section worked out. These are some of the things that DOT has actually made a lot of progress on, and we have made a lot of progress on with our staff in terms of what is acceptable and what is acceptable where. If you think about like in front of elementary schools, do they need bike lanes? Well, probably not. You probably need a wider sidewalk in front of elementary school, and it'd probably be okay to have the travel lanes maybe a little bit narrower and a wider shoulder to give the feeling to slow people down in front of those situations. The same around SCF perhaps, and other places around where we have high incidence of people using non-motorized travel, walking and biking and things like that. And this gives us a menu of options. We go from ordering lunch at a hot dog stand to going to the Cheesecake Factory, having a huge menu of options for different places in the county. And then when it comes to the actual cross sections, what we'll do is during capital improvement time, we'll come to you with recommended cross sections of roads and things like that, and why this location is more sensitive to pedestrian travel and cyclists and things like that based upon its location in the county. There are some places, some roads that we do improvements on may not look any different than what you have today, but other places really need and deserve something a little bit different to keep the vehicle speeds a bit slower, but allow for areas to have higher concentrations of walkers and cyclists and even transit users as well. We have a very standard vanilla cross-section for all that's everywhere in the county, and this allows us better customization and have those conversations internally ahead of time.
Yeah, and I mean, this is kind of new to us. We've been talking about it for a long time, but, you know, throughout the United States of America, this is not new stuff. And the quality of life that's being contributed in urban redevelopment throughout this country is amazing with these kind of things. And, you know, you showed the one example, Gaines Street in Tallahassee. I've been on Gaines Street. I went to a very old restaurant that was on Gaines Street, has a wonderful breakfast. I wish I could remember the name of it. But that restaurant was there for a very long time in what was a very low socioeconomic neighborhood. And the restaurant itself hasn't changed, but the area around it, bringing everyone in, making them feel much safer. I mean, I just can't emphasize enough how important it is for us to continue to show these examples and what it can do for urban redevelopment area, which is what we're focusing on. And we're going to talk about that next, but this obviously goes hand in hand. So the more examples we can have, you know, put them on our website, whatever. I was thinking when you were showing that Gaines video that we should put that on our website. These are the kind of things that can be done to improve the quality of life in our urban core, and that's what we've been talking about for a long time.
And getting back to Commissioner Bussel's comment about the cost differential, Edgewater Drive was more or less how to restripe the road. The money was there to already repave it. And you know, they didn't increase the landscaping or anything like that. So it's a menu. It's a menu. You can decide how much you want to spend. And on the maintenance side, if the maintenance costs, if they are higher, as you saw in the Edgewater Drive example, and more likely probably, although I don't think it's been done yet, for Gaines Street, the value of your property, the property values will add more to your tax base, which might offset and should offset your maintenance costs for your complete streets design.
Yeah, and just as a comment, I mean, so many of our people that live here come from other places. They come from historic urban areas. They know this stuff too. I mean, you go to Savannah, you go to any of these urban neighborhoods, and you can see that this is how it used to be done. You know, it used to be done for a more pedestrian scale because a lot of it was done before the automobile came in. It's really been only since the 50s and the 60s that we've changed this pattern. So, I mean, it's time to have options so that we can get back to something that, and, you know, we hear it from our millennials. This is what they're looking for, but you also hear it from us retirees. You know, we don't want to have to drive everywhere. And if we can have safer, more attractive roadways to accommodate both or accommodate all modes of travel, I mean, I'm completely in support of it.
Absolutely. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are we advocating 5 feet wide sidewalks, or are we looking to make sidewalks wider?
Commissioner Smith, right now the standard for sidewalks is 5 feet. It actually was upgraded about 10 years ago. It used to be 4 feet. We changed it to 5 feet many years ago. What this will allow us to do is to put a wider sidewalk where we feel it's appropriate. near elementary schools, near the colleges, anywhere where there's a higher concentration of pedestrians, we'll have a cross-section that has a wider sidewalk already. And so it gives us more flexibility without having a custom engineering conversation based on every situation.
You know, Florida is a senior citizen state. As I go through Ultimate Springs, Orlando, different places like that, Gainesville, Tallahassee, I'm not seeing 5-foot wide sidewalks. I'm seeing them extended for the elderly and handicapped, where people can jog and run without trampling over each other. A 5-foot sidewalk, what I see, it continue to push people into the streets because there's so many, it's not enough room to be on that sidewalk. So, I mean, 5-foot sidewalks to me is really extinct. I mean, I don't know too many governments pushing 5-foot sidewalks. I mean, most governments been, 8, 9 feet. I know you can do the minimum 4 or 5, but to get people to walk and get out of the street, and even for people who are jogging and running, even in residential communities, to keep them out of the streets, that sidewalk width normally is wider than that, certainly in the residential area. But you got people consistently walking. You got avid joggers and things like that, that the width of a sidewalk will have a lot to do with that. I've had quite a few people tell me that they, on the width of the sidewalk of 5 feet, if you got someone in a wheelchair, that's a pretty dangerous situation. With a 5-foot wide sidewalk. That's the problem we have with the bridge, right? With the Green Bridge. 5 feet wide, it's chaos on there. You can get more people to come across that bridge, Sharp, Impairment, and Braden, if they have the width. I know we're working on that situation. I think, my understanding, it'll be widened to, wider than 5 feet. So, I mean, I don't support 5-foot wide sidewalk. You're talking about, it just, to me, it just something that needs to move into the 21st century. I don't know too many. I may be wrong, correct me, please. I don't know too many governments are pushing these 5-foot, unless it's a land use issue in a certain community where you just can't get the width larger than 5 feet. I understand that. But certainly on right-of-ways in certain parts of the community, the sidewalk at least should be wider than 5 feet.
And you're right, it's a right-of-way constraint issue if you're trying to retrofit versus if you're designing a new roadway and, you set your standards in there for your right-of-way widths to accommodate wider sidewalks.
Yeah, because, I mean, I was just in Orlando, and you got hundreds of people jogging on these sidewalks. I know we want to be a tourist destination. Most tourist people come in, they like to jog and run while they're staying and spending money. And all of them not going to be downtown. They may be out in the unincorporated area, but the width of the sidewalk is pretty important for safety and public safety. When I see them all the time jogging and running, they 2 or 3 days, 4 days, and people jog every morning. But I think the width is very important. Thank you.
Commissioner DiSabatino, did you have any questions?
Hello.
Robin?
Here we go. I couldn't get it off mute. Yeah, great presentation, and I totally support what's going on, and looking forward to DOT doing the 15th Street East complete street project. And just an aside, maybe John can get back to us the timeline on that. It's great, and I support what Commissioner Smith said about the 5-foot wide. Maybe in some areas where there's new roadways, you can do those wider MRTs, so you can get the bicycles and strollers and people walking and rollerblading all at the same time and not bumping into each other. But looks great. I really appreciate it, and I'm all on board, and I do a motion to approve. Thank you.
Did you just make a motion, Commissioner? I was having a hard time hearing you.
I think she did.
Yes. Motion to approve. I know you have to open it up.
Right. All right. So we do have a motion by Commissioner DiSabatino, a second by Commissioner Whitmore.
Madam Chair, I just make sure we hear from the public.
I was getting ready to do that. Is there anyone from the public that would like to come forward and speak on this issue? Not. Oh, come on down.
Come on, Tim. He got skinny. I didn't recognize him.
Oh, my goodness.
Retirement has been good to you.
Yeah.
Yes, you look good.
I'm Tim Polk, but I need to be sworn.
Look how cool.
This is not a quasi-judicial, this
Okay,
is
good.
legislative.
I thought it was a public
Just want to make
hearing.
sure I stay on point with the
Oh, it's
procedures.
legislative, sorry. It was on the
Tim
chat.
Polk, Urban Planning Solutions, as well as a member of the Chamber's Infield Task Force. I think this is needed. As you well know, since I came here 10 years ago when I was a planning director in Bradenton, I always pushed the whole idea of having more of an urban context in Manatee County. And you guys have done a fabulous job in turning the corner. And as well as Commissioner Benak has talked about, what you're going to see is this is something that's happening all over the country. The whole idea of pushing this, not only in cities but also in counties as well. And so, kudos to the staff. Kudos to Little John, the consultant that worked on this and moving this forward. And I think you'll see some changes that you're going to be very happy and satisfied with. And Betsy will love it to death.
From one
Thank
planner
you.
to
That's all I have.
another.
Thanks, Tim. Anyone else from the public want to come forward? Not seeing anyone, we'll close public comment. So we'll get back to the motion. Motion to approve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Robin?
We got her.
She got it.
Aye.
Okay, it is approved unanimously. Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair, you may open agenda items 8 and 9 together,
Okay,
both land development code amendments.
all right. Nicole, go ahead.
Item number 8 is LDCT 1605, Ordinance 1624, this is Land Development Code text amendments countywide to include several amendments to all the chapters of the LDC as recommended by Little John to improve opportunity for infill, redevelopment, and development within urban cores. And then number 9 is LDCT 1602, Ordinance 1606, and that's Land Development Code text amendments, Urban Corridors Amendment. And these amendments include things such as establishing design guidelines and standards for specifically designated areas in the urban core, revising some definitions, reviewing the review authority and procedures, exempting urban corridors from special approval process, and adding a new map to depict the geographic extent of the urban cores. And then Little John will expand upon that more.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. My name is Pat Tayeski. I'm a senior planner with Little John. And I have a PowerPoint. And some of the first few slides may seem a little bit repetitive because we just went through the comprehensive plan amendments, but I think for the benefit of the public, it will be good to revisit why we're doing this. So we're going to talk about the Land Development Code changes today, but to give you the background, the reason why we're doing this is that we're trying to implement the vision that the county has for the urban corridors. We originally started with case studies. We looked at 3 sites in the area and realized that there were a lot of obstacles to redevelopment and infill and wanted to fix that. In order to do that, we had to go into the comprehensive plan and the Land Development Code and proposed amendments. We have taken both the comprehensive plan and the Land Development Code amendments through the public review process at the same time. So there have been numerous opportunities for public input. Just a recap, we have 6 corridors that we're considering. And we have Manatee Avenue West, Cortez Road, 53rd, 14th Street West, 15th Street East, and 1st Street. And you can see here in this map that based on the motion for the comp plan amendments, we have reduced the segment of 53rd. So when we worked on the comprehensive plan and the amendments were adopted, basically what we did, we were able to start allowing mixed use and encouraging mixed use in the urban corridors. We can now allow higher densities and intensities, either by right or through a bonus system. We are now able to allow heights that are more compatible with the character compatibility study. And we have eliminated a lot of obstacles in terms of requiring special approval or plan development. We're talking about these roadway corridors. However, not every single parcel on those corridors will be eligible for these types of regulations because they can only be used when you have a specific land use category. If you're in the retail, office, residential, mixed use, residential 6 through 16, and the industrial land use categories, those are the only ones where this would be applicable. The office land use categories are not. So with the comprehensive plan amendments already in effect, we are now moving into the land development code and talking about what amendments we need to make in the code to implement the plan. Now, just like when we considered the comprehensive plan, as we were working on the urban corridor amendments, we realized that there were a few things that needed to be cleaned up, fixed in the regulations. So we have two sets of amendments. The first set that I'm going to talk about is the countywide amendments. Nothing related to urban corridors, just countywide issues. Then when I'm done with those, I'm going to start talking about the very specific amendments that we're proposing for the urban corridors. So I'm going to go chapter by chapter. It's a little bit tedious, but I want to make sure that you understand the types of changes we're making. So in general, we moved some sections from the comprehensive plan to the land development code and from the land development code to the comprehensive plan. So we needed to reflect that in the ordinance. For chapter 1, for instance, we had a table that included dollar amounts for penalties. That's already in the code of ordinances. It was not necessary to have it here. So we're taking that out of the code, of the land development code. Your definitions chapter, because we made some changes in the comprehensive plan to some of the definitions, we needed to reflect that in the land development code, and also some cleanup that we had to do. Chapter 3 is the chapter where we have the review procedures for any development applications. And when we did the rewrite recently, we created a table so it would be easier for people to realize, okay, where do I go with my application for site plan or for rezoning or for comp plan amendment? And as we worked on that table, recently we realized that there were two items, the pre-application meetings and the workshops. Those are not mandatory, have not been mandatory in the county. So we wanted to change this table back to reflect that they're strongly encouraged but not required. Chapter 4 is your zoning chapter. We made some changes to clarify what happens when you have boundary issues, when you have a zoning district that maybe a site has two different zoning districts, or maybe there is something that is not that clear for staff to determine. So we put some language in to make it easier for staff to interpret those situations. We also had to make changes in order to calculate density and intensity for mixed-use developments. We didn't have that in the code before, so it was always very difficult to figure out how to do the calculations when you have vertical mixed use. Chapter 5, 6, and 7, those were mostly cleanups, terminology, some numbers that had been kept from a previous draft, and fixing a label for a figure. Chapter 9, that includes your entranceways section, and we clarified two provisions that were not changing what it was supposed to be, but it was just clarifying the language. And also, when we went through the comprehensive plan, we found a whole section that had to do with community design, and they were just recommendations. We felt that those did not belong in the comprehensive plan. They would be better in the land development code, so we brought them into the LDC. They're still recommendations, they're not requirements, but they're in a place where people would be able to find them easier. Chapter 10 is your transportation management chapter. Here we did make some changes that I want to make you aware of. Number 1, we lowered parking ratios. We realized that some of your ratios were really high compared to what we see in other communities. We're going to start requiring bicycle parking. We're going to increase the percentage of the compact spaces that a development can propose. And we're establishing more predictable loading standards. And then last, we are including a way to calculate parking for mixed-use developments. And I'm going to explain how that one works. So the ULI has a table that shows you the percent of use that a typical use would have for parking. So as we all know, residential parking is mostly used when you get home from work until you leave for work in the morning. For commercial, it's the other way around, or office. It's 8 in the morning until 5 p.m. for offices and later for retail. So using these percentages, I'm going to show you an example of how that would work. So let's say we have a development. They're proposing 52 apartments, 15,000 square feet of office, 10 of retail, 7 of restaurant. If we use the code the way it is today, they would have to provide 264 spaces because each use has a parking space requirement. The first thing that we're going to do is subtract the handicap parking because we do not want to reduce that. That will remain the same. Whatever the handicap space requirements are, that's going to remain. So if we subtract the 12 that they would be required to have, then we're talking about the 252 remaining spaces. That's the number that we want to lower. So we apply all those percentages that I talked about that came from the ULI, and we come up with a bunch of totals. We have 115, 192, 199, and the provision will say that you select the highest of those. So in this case, this development, instead of providing 252 regular spaces, they only have to provide 199. So that's all for countywide amendments. So now I'm going to talk about the amendments that are specific to the urban corridors. So starting with Chapter 2, we went into the definitions chapter, and we had to address the definitions for gross acreage because we want to make sure that the calculations are different for the urban corridors, and I'm going to explain that as I go through this. When we talk about density, let's say 40 dwelling units per acre, it means you can put 40 units in 1 acre. But one person may design it this way, where it's a bunch of little houses. Another person may group them on 1/4 of the site, and another person may go 2 stories, and another person may go high-rise. So density doesn't necessarily mean that a development is going to look just like the one next door just because they have the same density. Same thing for intensity. When we talk about intensity, it's measured in FAR, that's floor area ratio. So we take the size of your building divided by the size of your lot, and that's your FAR. So when somebody says FAR of 1, technically it's the size of your building is the same size as your lot. So this building shows that. Just like in density, if you start stacking them up, if you go to 2 stories, now you only need half of your site for a FAR of 1. If you go smaller buildings spread out all over your site, that's the same FAR. And if you got high-rise, same FAR. So when we talk about a mixed use, now we're stacking parking, retail, restaurants, or office, and then residential. So how do we measure that? So the way we're doing it is that for countywide, the FAR will determine how big your building can be, whether you have residential or non-residential, office, commercial. That FAR will tell you how big your building can be. But for urban corridors, where we want to encourage denser, more intense development, we are allowing them to stack those up. So if it says FAR of 1, there is your retail, office, restaurants, and then it says 20 dwelling units per acre, so that's on top of that FAR. So that's an incentive that we're giving to the developments along the urban corridors. Now, all these additional densities and intensities and all that I'm talking about, all that is dependent upon them meeting some standards that we have created, and I'll talk about those standards later. Chapter 3, what we did in that chapter, number 1, reducing the dependence on special approvals. So we're exempting developments along the urban corridors from special approvals. And then we also created a new section called modification of standards, because there's a lot of design and there's going to be a lot of detail on these buildings. We have decided that if somebody has a design issue, it doesn't have to be a hardship issue. If it is a design issue and they need a modification of by up to 10%, staff can review those and approve those. If it is between 10% and 30%, they're going to have to go to the board to get those approved. Now, if it is more than 30%, now it's getting into the area of a variance. At that point, they need to show that there is some type of hardship and justify that modification. Chapter 4, that's your zoning chapter. What we're doing, because we wanted to encourage this mixed use and trying to work with the current land use categories and zoning districts, we didn't want to just create another district for this quarter. So what we're doing is we're going into certain districts and ensuring that you can have the mix of uses. So now, for example, we can have multifamily in some of these zoning districts, like general commercial and some of the neighborhood commercial districts. And reversely, we're now allowing some neighborhood convenience retail in the higher multifamily zoning districts. We included 2 tables in Chapter 4. One table is going to be easy for developers to come in and figure out, okay, so if this is my future land use category, so that's the first column, which districts would I have to rezone to in order to take advantage of these urban corridor standards? So those are the potential districts that you can have, the second column. Then the third column tells you what the maximum density, and the next column, the intensity that you could have within those zoning districts. So in general, like starting with RS residential 6, we kept it at 6 dwelling units per acre, the way it is right now, but we increased the FAR to 1. And as you go down the rows, residential 16, in this case, we went above 16 and increased it to 20 dwelling units per acre, and the FAR is still at 1. When we got into the mixed-use categories, that's the retail, office, residential, and the mixed use, that's where you can achieve the highest density and intensity, which is 30 dwelling units per acre if you're in general commercial. Then you notice that there is a 30 dwelling units per acre /40. That means that we have a bonus system that would allow you to go even higher to 40 dwelling units per acre or to 2 FAR if you meet certain criteria, and I'll talk about those later. The other table has your dimensional standards, if you will. Open space, minimum lot width, building height, and setbacks. Height and setbacks are the things that are changing the most. For building height, for the lowest intensity zoning district, RMF 6, we're allowing 3 stories and up to 5 if they meet the bonus requirements. For all the other districts, we're going up to 5 stories as a base with the possibility of going to 7 with a bonus. For setbacks, just like we have talked when we were doing the comp plan and the complete streets, the buildings need to come a little bit closer to the street. So the setbacks are a 10-foot minimum, 20-foot maximum. The idea is that parking will be on the side or the rear. And the side setback and the rear setbacks are stated here. Now, 2 things that I want to make sure everybody understands, that there are standards in the code that we're putting in that will require step back if you have multi-story buildings. And also we have the airport impact overlay that restricts the height in certain areas. We're not changing that. That will still be in effect. So some sites may be ineligible to achieve the standards that we're showing on this table. So that's stated in the code. People will know up front that not everybody will be able to do as much development. Chapter 5 has standards for certain uses, and we clarified that the commercial locational criteria does not apply to residential 16, mixed use, or retail office residential. Those are mixed use districts, so it didn't make sense to require commercial locational criteria. Also, something new. We know that drive-throughs and gas stations are never going to want to increase density, intensity, height. But we wanted them to be consistent with the type of character that we're creating in the area. So we are requiring those to now provide a street wall around the site. And here are 2 examples. And what that does is that the person that is walking up and down that sidewalk will feel a little bit more urban. It's not your suburban feel that you have travel lanes on one side and asphalt on the other side. Chapter 7, that's where you have your buffer requirements. We put in a reference there to Chapter 9 because we have some very specific buffering standards in 9 for that, for the urban corridors. Now, Chapter 9, this is the chapter that everybody needs to read and everybody needs to be aware of what we're putting in there because these are the standards for the urban corridors. This is the bulk of it. Basically, we started with establishing a section on purpose and intent, explaining why we're doing this, why these standards were created. Then we talk about applicability. Is it new development? Is it redevelopment? Is it an addition? Is it change of use? So we specify which standards would have to be met. Then we talk about uses. And for uses, we refer back to Chapter 4, where we have the table of uses. And whatever we have in that table of uses, that's what goes. If it says that the use is permitted, then it's permitted. If it says that it requires special permit, it still requires special permit, even if it is in an urban corridor. Then we establish a section on blocks, lots, and building placement standards. Basically, the idea is to ensure that we still have connectivity in the area, not just for cars, but also for pedestrians. We have to address the urban form. It's not just additional density and intensity, and it doesn't matter what buildings look like. No, we need to make sure that those buildings look a certain way. And pedestrian orientation is very important to attract walkers to the area. just some examples. This is how we have been planning, in the past, and this example is in one of the urban corridors. The building is so far from the street that for a pedestrian to get to the door of that business, they have to first jump the shrubs, then cross the parking lot, and there are no pedestrian pathways through parking lots to finally get there. The other result of this is that those businesses, you cannot see them from the street, so they need big signs, and that's when we talk about sign pollution. In the area, we have seen that some buildings have started coming closer to the street, but still the design is just not there, because you still have the shrubs that you have to jump, you still have the parking lot that you have to go through. So Bradenton has been implementing a form-based code, and they have started requiring buildings to come close to the street. So we have seen that happening in the area, and we can see the effects that that can have. Sarasota, Tampa, all the neighboring communities are doing it too. Now, we don't want to go as far as this example that we have here, that this is in Sarasota, just south of here, where the buildings are so close to the street that there is no pedestrian atmosphere left. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen here. Continuing with Chapter 9 changes, we established a section that has standards for building design. The idea is not that we want to say everybody has to design a certain style, architectural style, but it's just certain guidelines that will ensure the buildings are attractive and pedestrian-friendly. This is an example. Anybody can come in tomorrow and build a box on any of these corridors. Put a window, a door, a sign, and they're done. We don't want that to happen. So we have standards that say if your building is this size, horizontally, vertically, then you have a projection or a recess of a minimum of so many feet. The difference that it makes is the picture at the bottom, you can see the difference that something like that can make. Now, this example shows that there was a box, they put windows, they thought that should be enough. Not necessarily. You have to break down that volume a little bit so that you start seeing a little bit more of that pedestrian friendliness and attractiveness. Other standards in Chapter 9 include landscaping standards, and these are supposed to be more urban. We're not talking about berms. We're not talking about huge areas of green space between the road and the building. We want those buildings to be visible and accessible. And we also addressed development compatibility, because this was something that from the very beginning, we were told that we needed to protect the neighborhoods, the residential neighborhoods that were flanking these corridors. So we went in and did an assessment of what we have right now in terms of buffers and what happens today if somebody wants to put multifamily next to single family. How would we address that today? So you have a chapter 7 I mentioned before, that has your buffer requirements, and it's got like a menu of options. So if you look at your use, this table at the bottom, if I'm doing residential, excluding multifamily, if I'm next to any of these uses, this tells you how wide the buffer has to be. So it goes anywhere from 10 to 20 feet, depending on how incompatible your use is next door. So with that width, then you go to this graphic, and then you determine whether you need just shrubs or shrubs and trees or trees and wall or a fence. It tells you basically, what additional elements you have to put within that buffer. So that's already in place. So even if we didn't do anything in Chapter 9, that would be a protection that would be offered by the code today. Then we started looking at height. Okay, we're going to put a tall building next to a single-family home. Do we allow tall buildings in Manatee County? And the idea that people have in their minds is that it's 35 feet all throughout the county, and that's not true. Your industrial districts allow 45 feet or 55 feet, depending on the zoning district. And also, you can also always ask for PD, and with PD, sky's the limit, pretty much. You can ask for whatever you want. So we have seen some taller buildings in the county in the past. But, so we knew, so it can happen in the county. We can have taller buildings. So how does that address compatibility? So the setbacks typically in the county run anywhere between 15 to 25 for the rear, and the side setbacks are typically 8 to 10 feet. But then there's a provision in the code somewhere that says that in addition to that side or rear setback, if you have a taller building, you have to put an additional 10-foot setback for every story that you go over one if you're adjacent to single family. So that concept was already in the code, so we wanted to use that. And something else, if you have a single family next to multifamily, the code says that you have to have 10 feet plus landscaping or a 6-foot high wall. We also went out and looked at other communities, and we were specifically looking at how they were addressing that compatibility of single family to multifamily or multi-story. We looked at Bradenton, Tampa, Orlando, Sarasota, Spokane, Austin, and they all had different formulas on how to do this, but they were going from minimum of 10 to a maximum of Orlando, which has such a complicated formula that when you put it in a graphic form, you realize that nobody in that district can have any more than 3 stories. So why even have the provision? So we are proposing for urban corridors that whenever you have a multi-story building next to a single-family home, first, your setback is going to mirror the setback next to you. So if our setbacks in the urban corridors are, 10 feet, but the single family next door has a 25-foot required setback, well, now that development in the urban corridor has to have the 25-foot setback. In addition to that, for every story over 3, which is the 35 that is typically allowed in the county, then they have to go back 20 feet for every story. It doesn't mean that we're going to have all wedding cake-looking buildings. They can recess the whole building, or they can recess the upper stories. It's up to the developer to do that. And then we're making that 6-foot wall, we're making that a requirement. Now, if you have multi-story buildings next to single family outside of the urban corridor, then we need to have a wall in between the 2 uses. Continuing on chapter 9, development review, we have less dependence on plan development and special approval. The idea is that we hope that people will be able to use these standards and come up with great developments without having to go through the PD process. And now let's talk about the bonuses. I mentioned that we are offering bonuses for density, intensity, and height. So how does that work? Typically, when you have a system like this, you think about, okay, what kind of, it's not animated, what kind of attributes we would like to see in this area. So we came up with the list that included mixed use, vertical mixed use. We wanted affordable housing. We want workforce housing. We want public open space. And we want parking garages. So the qualifier specifies how much the developer would have to propose in order to achieve the bonus. So the mixed use, I mentioned that we want that to be vertical mixed use, and if they do that, they can have the maximum height, density, and intensity that we noted on the tables. Affordable housing and workforce housing is 25% of the units would have to meet that qualifier. And we already have specific provisions in the code for affordable housing to ensure that they will remain affordable and not that 5 years from now they're going to sell them for whatever the market rate is. For public open space, the idea is that we're going to have more denser, more intense development, but we want to once in a while have a little open plaza or urban park. So this example down below the photograph shows a park that is in New York City. It's called Paley Park. And it's a great place to just take a respite from the urban jungle that Manhattan can be. And it's tiny. It's less than 3,000 square feet. With the landscaping, the fountain, the trees, it makes just a world of difference. And for parking garages, we have seen that a lot of the uses that we're so used to seeing with their surface parking are now using structured parking, like the Targets and the Publix, and it works. And the more urban development comes into the area, the more feasible it will be for these uses to do it. So in the meantime, what we're doing is like we're incentivizing it by saying that if you add parking, structured parking under your building, we're going to let you go 1 floor up. For every structure, for every floor of parking, you can go 1 floor up to the maximum height that we noted before. Now, again, going back to compatibility, if you're going to use a bonus, your building is going to have to be 100 feet from that single-family home next door if you're next to a single-family home. So we're protecting the single-family homes that way. Now, something, and it's similar to the complete streets item that you reviewed before, these standards are not mandatory. These standards are only for those people that want to come in and take advantage of higher densities and intensities. We are still going to see the Chick-fil-A's and the McDonald's or the Rooms to Go coming in and designing with the standards that we have had in the books for many years. Some people have asked, why aren't we doing this mandatory? We know that this is going to be a slow process. We don't want to stop development completely and then wait for the developer that wants to come in and do all these great things. So we know that eventually it will happen. we're hoping, sooner than later, but eventually we want people to come in and start proposing developments like what we see on this slide. It's medium height, high density, high intensity, with a lot of focus placed on the pedestrians. So what happens next? This is the first reading of the ordinance, and we're going to come back to you on November 15th, and that's going to be an evening meeting. And at that point, it would be the second reading of the amendments. And with that, I'll just be available for any questions.
Commissioner Whitmore.
Pat, very good work. I want to thank our staff, our legal department, all the thousands of hours that all of you've been putting in this over the years that you've been working on this, and I appreciate you hanging in there with us. There was one slide that you showed while you're trying to find, it was development along the urban corridors. You have Res 6, Res 9, if you can get to that.
Yes.
I came across, yeah, that's it. I came across a 7-story apartment complex, and I've lived here 48 years. I never even noticed it. It's on 26th Street West. It's been there for years, and I finally, when we were talking about this, I decided to stop and count it. And when I brought it before, none of us really realized it had been there. And I was kind of going around town, Westminster Towers, Manor, they're, higher, definitely more than 5 stories. They may be like 10 or 15. There's many around this area that you just haven't noticed. They've been here many, many years. So that doesn't give me heartburn. And I think what the public needs to also remember that this is our urban corridor that we have. This is not the whole county. This is where it's going to start. And we're going to eventually work throughout the county. But right now, this is just where it's going to start. So on this chart here, I don't know if it was that one, because you also had all other stories like commercial, and that would be, yeah, here it is. This is it. And I think it just needs to be mentioned that residential is still 3 to 5 for Res 6 and Res 9 is 5 to 7. And then when you get to the office and the commercial, things are a little bit different. But the Res 5, Res 6 is still 3 to 5 stories. And, I think I know since I've been up here, it's always given people heartburn, not realizing that we've been doing it off and on for years because we don't have height restrictions in Manatee County, more or less. So, and that's why you've seen what you've seen on some of the buildings we've done. But I think this is a great start. This is kind of what we need to do because I hear there's certain parts of this area that are tired and that we do need to look at ways to do economic development and redevelopment. There's a place, again, I keep going by Anna Maria Oyster Bar only because I was by there the other day on 41, that shopping center, and that's Robbins District. A gigantic shopping center, and I drove through. There's a laundromat, and there's like 5 businesses, and it's a gigantic shopping center. All it is cement. And all I keep thinking is hopefully somebody will take, and I don't think it's anybody in this area that even would do it. Maybe somebody that has experience in doing this would take that project on to show what it could be in the future. So anyway, do you have any comments about this, this chart again, just to make some people feel a little comfortable?
Yeah, and something that I noticed when you mentioned office, and before I mentioned we're not touching office, these are the office districts within the residential office, retail office, residential, mixed use. These are not for the office future land use categories. And I have a picture here that I would like to show you. I didn't have it as part of the presentation, but I think it's a great visual of what could happen. And like I mentioned before, density and intensity can look in many different ways, but this is a project that the city of Sanford decided to take on, and this is something that is really important. The city decided to make this happen. So it's similar to what we're doing here, but the city said, if we wait for the developer, they're never going to come in. So they took on the process of having a consultant design the site and then find a developer to build it. So this is about 40 dwelling units per acre. As you can see, is medium heights. You have a lot of courtyard in the middle. There's parking in the middle, but as you walk down the streets, you see that it is very urban in nature. And some people have asked, why don't we go higher? Why don't we go with more density or more intensity? The land development code is supposed to evolve. As we start seeing projects coming in, seeing what the market dictates, those details can be changed. But for now, this is what we're envisioning. We think that it can be manageable. It can be a good step towards the future of Manatee County. This is 200 units in 5 acres, basically.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Benak?
Yeah, I just, a few questions. How long have you been working on this project?
4 years?
I think almost 2 years.
Long time. Longer than that.
Years, and then before that, there
Before
was-
that, it was since beginning of 2012, when we did the rewrite of the Land Development Code.
Yes, because some of us remember when we went through that line by line,
Yes.
every single day for 5 days, every part of the code to talk about what was going to change and what wasn't going to change.
That was
Remember
horrible,
that?
too. by the way.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure there was somebody even hired before that, or maybe that when you guys became Little John or something. Oh, was there another
Yeah, we
group
had a
that-
different name before. We were acquired by a different company. But I mean, the whole idea goes beyond, before our time.
That's right. So this has been going on for a long time. The other thing that I noticed when I read the staff report, and I really appreciated the reference to all of the studies that have been done, which call for this kind of a change. Again, going back to the 90s, studies have been done calling for this kind of change. So this is not a new idea. This has been talked about for almost since I left the county in 94. This has been talked about. So I'm really glad that you listed all of those. I hope people, it's kind of a long staff report, but I hope people took the time to read it so they could understand where the impetus for these changes have come from through huge, huge amounts of public participation, discussion, regional discussion from the One Bay, the character compatibility study, all of these studies. So, as I like to say, maybe we can actually move on from a study and get something done.
That would be amazing.
Couple questions. Where are the maps? They're in the comp plan. Are they going to be in the land development code
We're
too?
going to have a map in the Land Development
Okay.
Code, too,
Yeah, I
in
didn't-
Chapter 9.
In Chapter 9. Okay, I didn't see that. And again, these primarily are creating incentives for a different urban form.
Yes.
And where, when you're a planner, that sounds so easy. And you brought up the shopping center
Oh, it's terrible.
that is down there at 60th and 41. I mean, there's little incentive for a developer who's collecting rent without doing any improvements to change.
Exactly.
And when I was back when I was in the private sector, I served on a committee in Sarasota, and we actually picked out sites and tried to talk with developers about what it would take. Never went anywhere, because there was no certainty that they could ever actually redevelop that, and this is going to provide that certainty. And I think that's super important that we have that certainty, because again, these are risky, when you take on a development, it's risky business. You don't know for sure how it's going to work out, and you put a whole heck of a lot of capital up front into a plan, and even to hire someone. And that was another question I had. It's a little bit complex, and I understand why it has to be a little complex. But we don't have a huge planning staff. We have our new redevelopment director, and I'm glad that she's here, because I think this is going to be part of her baby. But I hope that we will spend significant time training our staff about these, because, again, I mean, it's going to be an issue of how do we make sure that everybody is getting the message? How are they going to know that these opportunities are out there? So I don't know if we've talked about that, but that's something that I'm a bit concerned about. John?
You make a very important point there, and one of the things we're doing is Lisa Barrett has worked very hard with Pat and her team, and everybody in Badge has worked hard on this. Somebody said since 2012. It was really before that. We plan on Lisa leading the effort to have regular sessions with all of our staff, to include the building side, where we issue permits. I mean, there's a class going on right now. Building Officials Association of Florida is putting on a class for all our permitting people, plans examiners and inspectors.
Good.
So we're always in training mode. And this is another thing that Lisa's going to lead us on.
Okay.
No pressure.
Great, and I know that different organizations, because I served on the Chamber's Infill Task Force, Urban and Redevelopment Task Force, they've been working hard on this for a very long time. You know, again, back when I was in the private sector, I was on that task force, been working on this for a long time. And I was very impressed with the lot of the public comment that's attached to the report. The Millennial Group, the time that they've taken to write letters of support, very detailed letters about why this is important to them, why it's important for something to change in the county. And I know change is hard for a lot of people, but things are changing. You know, when you talk about reducing parking spaces, I know we talk about automatic vehicles, and people don't believe that's real, but it is real, and Florida's leading the way, and how that might change the requirement for parking spaces, parking garages, you know. So we talked about somebody could go to the airport, automatic vehicle, drop them off, car turns around, goes back. You don't need a parking space anymore. So just some of those things I know it's hard to think about. Another question I had, coastal high hazard. I saw somewhere that there would be limits in the coastal high hazard. I didn't hear you say that, so that they would not necessarily be able to get density bonuses. Is that true?
That's true, yeah.
Okay. So density bonuses would not be available in the coastal high hazard, which I think is important, because that's an issue that we talk a lot about. The gas station wall, I wasn't sure. So a new gas station that would come in on an urban corridor would automatically have to put that wall in, because you don't get any bonus when you're a gas station, is that correct?
It would be for new development,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Or
That's-
redevelopment if one
nice.
closes and they need to.
That's a big change,
Safer
big
for the
change.
pedestrians.
That's nice. All right. And then your point about city taking on, you know, many cities do that. City of Sarasota did that with land that they have, put it out for bid, for RFP, to look at who could come in and develop it. You know, it's risky to do that, but you get the rewards. I happen to work on one of those projects in the private sector. It was called the Renaissance, and now I can't think of what the name of those Alamari or something. I can't remember the condos that are there on 41. But it was an interesting process, because the city owned the land and put it out because they wanted to see it developed. So
It
that's something.
triggers,
Yeah.
it triggers other
Yeah,
developments.
and so that's something that we'll have to look at. But I think that's all my questions for now. Thanks.
Commissioner Smith?
Let's start with the height. I think Commissioner Whitmore mentioned, unless I misunderstood her, do we have a height limit? You mentioned, I believe you mentioned 45 to 55 feet. Is that the height limit? Do we have one
In the county?
in the county?
Right now, most of the county is at 35 feet, but if you're in an industrial district, you can go up to 45 or 55 feet. And if you set back your building away from the street, you can even go higher than the 45 or the 55. That's in industrial. And also with planned development, you can also come in and request any height. Really, the code does not say, you know, PDs can go up to 10 stories or 15. It doesn't say that.
Okay, in the urban core that we're speaking of now, so you would have the opportunity to, based on case situation, to look at that?
For urban corridors, and I'm going to go back to that slide that shows the table. If you are in a residential multifamily 6 zoning district, you can only have 3 stories, so it's similar to what we have now, 35 feet. But you can go up to 5 if you qualify for a bonus. If you do affordable housing or open space or mixed use or parking garage. If you're in residential multifamily 9 or professional medium, neighborhood commercial medium, general commercial, and industrial or manufacturing, your base height will be 5 feet. 5 stories. people could
5 feet.
build, yeah, 5 feet would be great. 5 stories by right, basically. Now, if they qualify for a bonus, then they could go up to 7, but that's it, that's the cap. It would be 5 or 7, depending on the bonuses.
Okay, well, let me rephrase my question. I understand all of that. If someone wants to come in and build something higher than 8 or 9 feet, would the staff be able to look at that?
They can still do plan development. That is not out of the question still. If somebody
Okay.
wants to do plan development, they can do plan
They
development.
will be able to have that discussion.
They can have that discussion. They will
All
come
right.
before you.
Dealing with restaurants, Taco Bell, Burger King, and McDonald's, what type of design would we have in urban core? I mean,
For
would it-
those types of uses, unless they want to do urban-type development, they would not be required to meet any of these standards. They would do whatever is in the code today.
I guess I'm looking at design. I was in Temple Terrace yesterday, well, in Tampa, Hillsborough. And boy, the city is awesome. But you won't even know it's a McDonald's or a Burger King.
Exactly.
And I think those are the designs we should be going by. You see the logo, but it looked luxury,
Yes.
like a restaurant.
Yeah, we created the standards, the design standards, just specifically for these types of developments. But yeah, I mean, many other communities have adopted those standards citywide, countywide,
Is that
district-wide.
something that we can get for the urban core?
For the urban corridors,
Yeah.
only if they want the additional density and intensity. Just for the regular development, we're not adopting that at this point.
I think we should really look at that. I mean, if you go around in most cities and they're getting away from those box-looking, them colors, and changing it to more where it looks like a luxury area of landscaping and people just coming in and not knowing it's a fast food restaurant, but you can see the logo and you know what it is. I've seen that down the Hutchinson Island when you're going toward there in Fort Pierce. You got it going down to Naples. When you pull off those, you don't even kind of can tell it's a fast food restaurant. So I'm not into those colors and boxes and things like that. You know, they were good to get people coming. But I think we should really look at that design and the scheme of things there if you're going to redevelop. Now, the plan that you have before us, I liked the plan when I met with you. I did get a printout, and Mr. Bernard did send that printout to me. But allow me to ask you this question here. A plan is only good enough if someone who has a financial interest is willing to buy into it. Is this plan good enough for someone to buy into it with enough incentives to make it worth their while to look at redeveloping and revitalizing the community?
Yeah, the way you have it right now, if somebody has a shopping center, what can they do with that shopping center today? Turn it into a different shopping center, but they don't have any incentive to make a big change. Now we're saying, well, now you can go up to 5 stories, maybe 7 stories. You can have residential, you can have commercial, you can have all these other uses that you can get more out of your site. That's a huge financial incentive for them to do it. The hope is that people are going to start realizing that soon, and they are going to start taking advantage of that. But the development potential for all these sites is growing.
So you see that if someone wants to revitalize and look at this plan, that it'll be enough there for them to come in and want to invest into this area? Okay. I know Councilman Gallo and Patrick Roth are big advocates of revitalization and moving slum and blight, and I know they're concerned about us from the county standpoint as they continue to move 9th and 14th Street in the unincorporated area, going into the unincorporated area. What is the plan of the county government? So I guess this is our plan to start something to match with the city of Braden where it runs into the unincorporated area.
Yes, when we did the assessment report, that background report, that it was a huge report, but there is a section where we looked at what Bradenton was doing, and we did a table that compared, okay, what height are they allowing, what kind of setbacks are they looking at? So we looked at that so that it would be a smooth transition, especially along 41. Manatee Avenue is a little bit different, but 14th especially, we wanted to be consistent with what they were doing.
Because on 14th, you have a lot of empty buildings, large scales of land. And I think Commissioner Whitmore is correct when you see these large properties, unless you have some incentives for them to come in, those properties are going to stay there forever like that. It's just such large land, but it's a lot of opportunity if someone comes in and see what we're offering here.
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt to have the economic development staff knock on doors and say, did you know that we're doing this? Did you know that you have more development potential now? That would at least, get them to understand that, the county is willing to look at development proposals that would allow more development.
And this will allow staff to be able to deal with any developer that comes in and may want to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, to be flexible enough to be able to sit down and talk to them with this plan right here to get something probably moving forward.
Yeah, and when you say flexible, there are standards. I mean, it's not like a PD where you can suggest any setbacks that you want or anything like that, but the standards are designed in a way that is going to allow urban development. It's going to
Well,
allow
yeah.
them to come closer to the setbacks. It's going to allow them to go bigger and denser.
I guess I got to talk as a banker, which is the worst thing I can say, but if you present something to me and I'm basing on me approving your loan, based on what you tell me and what's the impact going to be to this bank and what the interest return going to be, I make a decision whether I'm going to give you the money or not, based on do I see it's feasible. To my point, if a project comes into Manatee County that may bring millions of dollars of tax revenue, let's say $50 or $100 million tax revenue into the urban core, would that be something that staff can look at? Or would would you recommend to hinder that?
Yes.
Okay,
That was a good answer.
yes.
That's from your banker.
Thank you. He dressed like one
I
today.
know, today.
Okay,
Commissioner
all
Whitmore.
right, thank you.
And just one last thing about, you mentioned the city that actually offered to mainly start the ball rolling, and I've heard the comments that Commissioner Smith has made, and, that one lot, it's so blighted, and to think that maybe that could be, I'm just talking, because I can't talk to anybody about this except up here, just like a pilot project where you could get USF and Ringling to come up with what our changes are, and then somebody talk with the owners of the shopping center and say, hey, this is what you could do with your property now, are you interested? Or, or maybe if he does want to sell it or something, then somebody else could at least see could happen with it and the return on investment. And maybe we could kickstart it for the rest of the urban core if we could actually demonstrate a project where it would work. Because we at Manatee County aren't used to this yet. And I was talking to somebody the other day, our developers aren't used to this yet. They're used to building houses and, what we're seeing now. So Sarasota, there are maybe people down there that are used to this, but maybe this would be an idea to have something to show our business community. I think, John, madam.
Yeah, Mr. Barnott, did you want to?
Well, and you played right into our hand, Commissioner. Thank you very much. That's why Jerry's here today, is because she's vested in this process. Her team probably going to be reaching out to a lot of these shopping centers and structures and things that, we've got something new. And here's what we can do. Would you be interested? And I know where you're coming from. You can't plan for everything. So we think we have, but if somebody comes in and they've got something we've never seen before, yes, we're going to listen.
Okay.
Yes, we're going to find a way to get them where they want to be.
To finish, though, some place that's out of the box is like USF and Ringling to assist. I mean, to show, just like that city did, they actually showed the developer what it would look like, what you could do. And then Jerry has something to bring to them.
I think you've been working with them.
Yeah, totally work with them. I mean, just reach
But they
out
have
to them.
been. They have already.
Yeah, reach out.
Yeah.
How would I know that?
No, you wouldn't.
Okay, so that's what I'm asking. I guess, Jerry, you could tell me you've been working with them, or somebody has?
Good morning, Jerry Lopez. I am the Director of Redevelopment and Economic Opportunity. I wanted to just address the board for some of the comments that I've been hearing, and as Mr. Barnott said, that is exactly what I have been tasked to do. These standards and these amendments that you're doing today absolutely set the foundation for attracting that urban investment that we want for our urban corridors. Whether that is 100% able to be financed is a different question, but that is something that we're going to explore, to talk to those developers to see if they are able to do that, and if they need something additional or if something that's not working, that's where I will come back to talk to staff, to look at what those are, perhaps if there are additional incentives or if there's other things that are needed to be able to get those projects going, then that's what I will come back to be bringing back to you. But those are the kinds of things that we will explore, looking at this is what is allowed, and then from the other side, then what can be financed. Sort of that bridge is something that we'll be exploring. Thank you.
Mr. Osborne, did you want to
Yes, ma'am,
add to
thank
that?
you. Just to, when I was on the private side years back, I had some clients that had projects and interested projects on US 41 corridor. We couldn't make the numbers work because of the constraints that we found with the zoning and the process, the lack of certainty. And some of the changes we're making would address those things where those projects would become viable today. And also to Commissioner Whitmore's point, we actually did engage University of Florida some time ago. This was actually back when Commissioner Benak, you were working with the chamber on the infill work as well. We engaged them, and there was a PhD student who actually is a local, actually now an adjunct professor of the University of Florida, Linda Stevenson. Her office is, I believe, right next door upstairs. And she did a redevelopment analysis and pro forma for that parcel you were talking about, that old shopping center.
Really?
On 69th and 41. And we helped her with that a little bit, and she did the whole analysis for it, did a plan for it. Gave it to the owner. He said, thanks, but I'm making so much money just by what it is today. I'll keep this in mind in the future. But of course, in the recession, everything else happened. But there was something done. UF was involved. That is a great example that we could try to repeat again in the future and utilize the services of these universities that we have, not just up at Gainesville, but here locally, to help out with redevelopment issues and questions and having those plans done like that. So we'll try to continue and match people up as we can as well and work with Jerry on promoting this project.
Commissioner Benak?
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, if you look at like the Innovation 41 study that was done that actually took place from downtown Sarasota all the way up to Whitfield, they were looking at partnering, and now we actually have, and that's really what I meant by the colleges have partnered. They do have a group. I can't think of the name of it. I don't know. What is it called?
C4.
C4, yes, that they're all working together for transformation. I mean, that study went a long way of working with New College, University of South Florida, Ringling, FSU Center, and City of Sarasota. And it was really, the Innovation 41 was kind of, we weren't involved as much as Sarasota was in it. Because Sarasota, the North Trail, they were working really hard to try to get redevelopment along that area as well. But they just kept running into problems. They could not make it work. They could never adopt anything. So being the competitive person I am, yeah, we're going to beat them. But no, there's been so much discussion, and the partnership is very, very strong between the institutions. Right now, I know that I wasn't at the chamber retreat, but I think they presented, they've been having lots and lots of discussions of how, because now they're offering classes that you can take at one institution and go to another, and they're really looking for housing. They're looking for all kinds of opportunities. Certainly, they're going to be a great partner in this. And I know Dr. David Brain worked with the city of Bradenton. I attended a lot of those work sessions that was really about the Village of the Arts primarily and redevelopment, but a lot of great ideas came up with USF, and I talked to John about engaging them, and he was already working with UF, but I know the students at USF did some really cool artwork for that, and they really were involved, so we got to keep them involved as much as we can, and so we need to continue to work with our partners like the chamber, Michael Gallen sitting in the back, so that we can
Oh, I didn't even
hiding in
see
the back, and the city, so we can keep moving this ball forward, at least getting the message out. I know, Jerry, that's going to be your job. So.
All right, I don't have any more commissioners on the board, so I'm going to go ahead at this time and open public comment. I do have two people signed up. The first, Matt.
You put me on the board for after?
Oh, she didn't.
Will do. Matt Brockway,
I forgot.
I believe.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, my name is Matt Brockway. I'm a shareholder with iCard Merrill in Sarasota. I'm a land use attorney. And first off, I'd like to applaud and thank the county staff and their consultants and their efforts and progress thus far in this process. It sounds like it's been a very long road, and hopefully the light at the end of the tunnel is growing brighter. I have a brief comment on one provision in Chapter 4, the zoning, and it's more specifically Section 401.3.B.2.B, which is the calculation of intensity for vertical mixed use. We would suggest that the calculation of this maximum intensity for vertical mixed use projects should not aggregate both the residential and the non-residential square footage in the maximum FAR. Rather, the non-residential FAR for maximum intensity should be calculated and dealt with independently, as should the maximum residential density. In short, it should be looked at the way calculated in the manner, from what I understand, it's being calculated in the urban core or urban corridor provisions. They're being treated differently and calculated differently, and that's my understanding from the reading of the materials and hearing the presentations. I think there should be consistency throughout the county on this point. Lumping the calculations together in this manner, I won't say disincentivizes, but it doesn't give as great of incentive for vertical mixed-use projects as it otherwise would. However, if adopted as drafted, I think it should be clear that projects that are currently or have been applied for or are currently under process should be treated in the manner that the maximum intensity is currently calculated, which, from what I understand, is the way it's proposed in the urban corridor chapter, not the county-wide amendment. If I'm incorrect, please correct me.
I think they're gonna.
I am?
Staff?
It's my understanding that they're not separated and aggregated in calculating the maximum intensity currently.
We will address that, or do you want to go ahead and do that now?
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused because the way we're proposing it is that if you're not in an urban corridor, you have to stay within the maximum FAR. Your density has to be within that FAR. But if you're in an urban corridor, we're allowing them to stack. So you have your FAR, so your building can, your commercial part can be as big as your FAR, but then on top of that, you can have density. The density is not included in the FAR. Is that how you understood it?
Yes, it's my understanding that currently the stacking is allowed.
In the urban corridors? Will be allowed.
I'm talking about currently.
No, it was not addressed.
It's not addressed? Okay. But in any event, if it's adopted as drafted, then moving forward, the projects that have already been applied for are already in process. This new Section 401.3.B.2.B should apply moving forward and should not be retroactive. So,
Okay, now he's confusing me.
All right, Commissioner Benak, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually had this as a point that I think it's good because it is confusing how the county calculates the FAR. Today, my understanding, because I did a mixed-use project once, and you have to take the area that is residential and use that square footage, only the area that's dedicated to the residential, and then you have to take the area that's dedicated to the commercial and calculate that maximum. You don't get to blend them like you do in the city of Sarasota. So what's being proposed is to allow that blending in the urban corridor. So if I understand you correctly, you would like to have that blending beyond the urban corridor.
apply countywide.
That's what I thought
Yes,
you were
ma'am.
saying. You're not
You
trying
said
to.
it so much more eloquently than I did.
And that's interesting request, that's all I'll say.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith?
Well, I will yield to Mr. Bernard. I mean, certainly we would like anything to do countywide. It would make any sense to have this on this presentation taking place if we did that.
On December 6th, we're having a work session with the board to continue to move forward with more changes to the code. Personally, I agree with Matt. So we will be addressing that countywide.
Ms. Shank, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to note, we've already advertised this process and required council plan amendments. We can't change this now. It has to be a separate initiative, as Mr. Barnard indicated, in the future.
December the 6th, we will discuss it.
All right, before I go back to Commissioner DeSabatino, Tim Polk, did you want to come forward on this one as well?
Boy, I'm glad I don't have to do this anymore. But I'm Tim Polk, Managing Director, Urban Planning Solutions, as well as a member of the Chamber's Infill Task Force. I am in support of this as a profession, as well as being a member of the task force. I think the main thing that I see what's happening, and I was listening to the questions that Commissioner Smith had in regards to will people really support this from the standpoint of developers. And I think what you're seeing right now, I know before I left the city of Bradenton, we're seeing more redevelopment activity and more redevelopment interest. And some of the things that you've done in regards to hiring staff, first bringing on John, and then bringing on other people, and really fine-tuning the planning department, and then also bringing in Jerry Lopez to be over this new department that do a redevelopment. Now you have the tools in your toolbox, because this particular standards that's being addressed right now, urban corridor standards, will be something that you'll be able to use as a way to tell people this is what you can do, not this is what you can't do. And having Jerry work with the planning department with Lisa and John, this would be able to do a lot of good things that you're trying to do in regards to urban corridors. And so I think what you're seeing today and what's being presented today was great. One more thing, I forgot to mention the whole thing when you talked about the complete streets. That's something I think the planning staff really needs to work with the Metropolitan Planning Organization to see what other communities are doing in Sarasota as well as in Manatee County, and also bring in the jurisdictions as well as island communities the whole idea of complete streets. I know that was something that we were talking about before I left. Claude Tankersley, who's the Public Works Director, and I were talking about that, looking at that before we left. But that's something I think could be addressed. Some of that is already addressed in City of Bradenton's code with form-based code. We have thoroughfare standards that really mimic the complete street standards that was talked about earlier. So again, I am in support of what's being presented today. Again, kudos to Manatee County and as well as her staff, doing a great job. And let's keep moving forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tim. Anyone else from the public want to come forward? Come on down, Mr. Marshall. Okay.
Thank you. Again, Rachel Layton with ZNS Engineering, and I have been sworn. I'm actually have the honor to serve as the chair of the Infill Task Force for the Chamber, and they asked me to come today and read the Chamber's letter into the record, because the Chamber and the Infill Task Force have been very supportive of the process all along. We've been getting briefings and trying to contribute and collaborate for really the last 4 years. So it's very exciting for us to be able to see this. So I'd like to read this into the record. The Manatee Chamber is pleased with the direction the Board of County Commissioners is heading as the board moves forward with creative solutions to encourage urban infill and revitalization along our urban corridors, especially in Southwest County. The Chamber strongly supports the direction to provide flexibility and enhance the opportunity for redevelopment by updating the county's comprehensive plan and land development code as recommended by Littlejohn consultants and county staff. The Chamber feels that this initiative supports the ULI report and the goals of the county for reinvestment in the urban areas of the county. In 2009, the Chamber's Urban Infill and Revitalization Committee presented recommendations for urban infill and redevelopment in a workshop to the Board of County Commissioners. We particularly focused on the challenges of attempting to accomplish quality infill and redevelopment under the county's existing land development code, and more recently, citizen and business representatives have voiced their desire for new businesses and redevelopment along our time-worn urban corridors. The county's current suburban-focused land development regulations are not conducive for the type of revitalization necessary. The recommendations submitted by county staff and Little John bring forth the necessary changes to create an urban-oriented land development code. The recommendations include but are not limited to allowing mixed use and greater densities and intensities, removing development obstacles such as required special approval and rezoning when certain standards are met, greater flexibility with administrative approvals, and increased building height. Redevelopment along the targeted urban corridors will substantially increase tax revenue, and coupled with reinvestment through the Southwest County Tax Increment Finance District, will allow the county to leverage its resources to further spur revitalization efforts. We believe these efforts will contribute to the retention of current and future workforce by creating economic opportunities and lifestyle choices through a diverse mix of housing options, infrastructure, multimodal transportation, social and business opportunities. As our land development code and comprehensive plan evolve, we encourage continued efforts to promote smart and responsible urban infill and redevelopment. This type of revitalization will enhance our community's quality of life and build a strong business environment. The Chamber applauds the County Commission and the county staff for their visionary leadership and appreciate the foresight of the board. And the letter is signed by the Chair, Trudy Moon, and I am also in support of this. We're just very pleased to see the direction the county is moving, and thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Marshall.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I haven't been sworn. I'm Ernest Sandy Marshall. I'm first vice president of the Federation of Manatee County Community Associations.
This is not something that you need to be
I have to
sworn
swear for this?
No, sir.
No cussing at all, right? Okay. I'd like to deliver to the board at this time a letter of authority from my association. I have the original and 7 copies. One for the record. The original is on top for the chairman. And I'd like to read the letter that I just gave you. Make sure I got a copy for myself here. Let me have one of those back. I need one for myself. There you go. That's the original. Give that to Madam Chairman. I'll take one of the copies. Thank you. In the interest of time, I'm going to read this. It'll save a little time, and then I'm going to explain the thinking and reasoning behind why this letter was written. I received a copy of the staff report and want to thank the staff for that. And I would applaud what is going on. This is progress, and that's what we want to see, and that's good. This letter is dated November 2nd, 2016, to the Board of County Commissioners, regards these 2 public hearings today. Dear Commissioners, on behalf of the Federation, either I or Ernest Sandy Marshall, our first Vice President, is authorized to speak on behalf of the Federation at the above public hearing relating to the above referenced proposed ordinances, which is the public hearing for today. The comments and letters of the Federation to this board dated 6/16 and 8/30/16 relating to the new urban corridor plan and amendments to the Manatee County Land Development Code are hereby incorporated herein by reference. Upon reviewing the staff report for this hearing, if this is the last public hearing, but what I understand, this is the first reading, so we're going to have another one. So
November the 15th.
This may tie in very nicely with what needs to be done here. On adopting the County Land Development Code, it is clear that neither the public or the county, nor are they able to discern, or the Commission is not fully aware of what is being finally proposed, nor are they able to discern what needs to be changed to better protect the existing residential, business, and the agricultural community and the environment of this county. Accordingly, both the proposed Land Development Code and Urban Corridor amendments need to be continued as follows, and I'll explain why after I read these off to you. Number 1, immediately schedule an appropriate date and time at the Civic Center to have a workshop for the County Commission to review these proposed amendments. We had one before talking about what was needed. We've got one now. Now we need to go back and have it aired more fully other than like today. Number 2, thereafter hold a public hearing at the Civic Center for the public to hear a presentation and be allowed to ask questions about the 2 proposed amendments. 3, after the 2 above meetings are held, reschedule the public hearing at a reasonable time thereafter before adopting any changes to these amendments so that the public can have the final input to the county commission, signed by our president, Jim Kaiser. Now, the basis for this, folks, is simply this. A fair reading of this staff report indicates that you have a situation where you're dealing with whether the dog wags the tail or the tail wags the dog. And what I mean by that, the dog in this situation is the county. The tail is the developers. They are the ones, if they're not careful, are going to be telling the county what to do as opposed to the county telling them what to do. And so that should never be given up by the county at any time. Now, if you review the staff report, I want to call your attention to page 7. And if you look at paragraph, page 7 of the staff report, on either pages 4, 5, 9, and 11, there are statements that simply say that there is nothing mandatory on the part of the developers to do anything but what, in effect, they want to do. If you look at the paragraph 4 under chapter 3, these are the review authorities. Development order review. When a workshop is encouraged, voluntary but strongly encouraged. There's no mandatory requirement. Number 5, pre-application meeting. Recommended that they have a meeting, but not required. Number 8, general plan development, review process, pre-application meeting. Pre-application meetings are recommended, not required. Number 11, preliminary plat review process, pre-application meetings are recommended but not required. Now, I think a fair-minded view of this is that developers are not going to jump through any hoops that they don't have to jump through to get what they want done. And that's understandable. That's a business decision from their standpoint. But the county is charged with the responsibility of protecting the people, the health, welfare, and safety of the people that are here now, not the ones coming in. Now, I would suggest to you that anyone that would look at this would be hard-pressed to say that it should be mandatory. You can be flexible on giving discretion power to your staff to review it, but don't give up this power. Make them come in. Make them tell you what they're going to do, and then the public, let them know what's going to happen. This is all going behind the doors, so to speak. Either they don't show up if they don't want to, or they do. And even if they do, what do we find out about it? What this is like, it's analogous to if you leave the developers in control, it's like put the fox in the hen house to guard the chickens. You can't do that. You've got to have protection for the public. And the only way you're going to get that is making these people come in, explain to staff what's going to happen. Staff then presents it out here in the public so we can see, and there's time set up so that these things can be reviewed. Finally, I would say to you that there's 2 recent cases, and I know your legal staff is familiar with it. The plan development comp plan is a constitution for this county on how we progress into the future. From when it was 25,000 people when I moved here to up to where it's now 175,000. And so it's the key to what happens. Because if you give up in your plan the power to say no when a developer walks in here, you're not going to be able to go across the street and overturn that with the wording that's in here when you leave all this stuff in a form where they can come in if they want to or if they don't have to. You need to make them come in. And the second thing is this. It's the only tool that the public has that they can enforce and stop either the county making a bad decision because of either a plan like this, the way it's written, or if you have it stronger and you still make a bad decision, is to be able to go into court and show this to the court and say, look, this is not consistent with this plan, what they're proposing. And we, the public, don't want this to happen because it's not in the best interest of this county. That's the only enforcement power you're going to have if you don't get this worded right. Now, do not throw caution to the wind. You've heard the talk already in the comments Commissioner Benak brought up. Been a long time working on getting this from being the horse and buggy stage, so to speak, in Manatee County up to where we are today. Don't throw caution to the wind. Take the time to get it right. Think about what has been pointed out here. If you look at that staff report, those sections that I just told you about, there's no urgency to do this right away. I would suggest to you that the responsibility that is heavily placed on your shoulders is to see to it that we have a strong plan, strong comp plan to protect the people, and instead of adopting something that is liberal and developer-friendly, and until this has been sufficiently vetted and reviewed to overcome this and to put strong compatibility and consistency language in there that can be used to measure something that's already here with what they're trying to bring in, you're going to have a plan that's going to be in the hands of the wrong end of that dog. So that would be my suggestions to you. We've got time from what I see now to come back to that. But take a look at that staff report on those pages where I pointed it out to you, where this is voluntary. Get that voluntariness out of there. No, make them come in. If staff, you give them some discretionary power, say, okay, well, looks like this will fit over here, fine. But don't give up your power, folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Anyone else from the public like to come forward? Not seeing anyone. I'll close public comment. Commissioner DiSabatino.
Yes, thank you. And good comments from Mr. Marshall. He always has a objective and impartial way to look at things. I also wanted to take the time to thank all the staff, Little John, for working on this all these years and hanging in there with us. The presentation was very thorough, and they took the time to meet with each one of us individually to show us the presentation, and looking forward to the next hearing. And a couple things that I had, just to clarify this on the record, these changes are for the urban corridor, and are we referring to the Southwest TIF map? Is that what this map is, for the record?
Yes. Here comes John.
Here comes John Osborne now.
Madam Chair, the urban corridors map that's in their packet, I believe, is the one that shows the actual segments of the roads we're talking about for the land development code amendments, but also the overall area is our county urban service area, not specifically the TIF. The TIF boundary is a little bit different, but it's similar.
Similar.
Okay, so it's a larger area than the TIF, correct?
Similar in size. I don't recall if it's larger or smaller, but it is similar in size. The urban service area does not include the coastal high hazard area, so it's probably a little bit smaller.
Right, and I had written down that I wanted to thank Commissioner Benak for bringing that up, that it's not the coastal high hazard area, because we had eliminated that. Also, thanks to Rachel Layton and for the chamber remarks, very well written, and Mr. Polk. All his input is very well received, and I like how he indicated it's another tool in our toolbox, and it's not something that's mandatory. It's something that we're going to be offering, like our tax abatement. And just recently I met with some landlords, and they were wanting to find out what incentives the county had for them fixing up their properties as well, because we're going to be discussing that in future workshops. And they brought up maybe some tax credits, a percentage of what they spend on revitalizing their properties, or a percentage of their investment up to a certain amount or up to a certain time period. So that's all. We can discuss that in the future. And also, Jerry Lopez and John Bernard, wanted to thank them, and Sherry Courier and her staff, moving forward to be proactive rather than reactive, and going out and reaching out to the community. You had spoken about, that's my mom's phone, we had spoken about Bay Drive and 41, and that's been on my map for a long time, because that's really the gateway into Manatee County. And so that would be great to reach out. I know you've reached out to that owner before, but maybe there's, another carrot that we can offer him, and, timing is everything. Also, Commissioner Smith said something really great regarding, is this enough? What other incentives are out there? And this would segue into what the landlords are saying, because even though we have these tools, we want to just make sure that we would have enough to appeal to different investors and different projects. And let's see what else. Sorry to take so much time. I like how you're reaching out to the community and looking at applicable sites that this could work, and we could work with the owners of the sites. Also, working with our local banks for them to offer creative financing, special rates, terms, and so forth, to get them to reinvest back in the community as well. And then lastly, I just really, again, wanted to thank everyone. This is just creating a new pathway to put us on the roadmap for the future. And I just think that we've been talking about it, and finally, we're all A-types up here. We're all seeing, as I think Mr. Polk said, extra light at the end of the tunnel, where we have all these tools. And, it's funny because right now I'm sitting in my mom's condo in Delaware, and it's an older building in the city, but I'm on the 9th floor looking out, and even though I'm in the city, it just gives you the feeling of space, feeling of, even connectivity to everyone around you. Across the street is a church. Next door and across the street are single-family residents, 2- and 3-story residents. On the other side is a school and another private club. So you have all these mixed use going on, and it works. And it's walkability. It's next to a bus line. You can walk to shopping. So I think this is like the shot in the arm that we need to bring the millennials in, the baby boomers who don't want to, as my husband says, he's tired, even though we're in a over 55 maintenance-free community, you still have to maintain your property, and he's tired of that. So, I think this is presenting options for a lot of different people and creating just a new landscape for Manatee County, improving on our aesthetics, our way of life, and, moving us in a forward direction. And just, again, wanted to thank everyone involved. That's it.
All right, commissioners, before I go to the board, it is 12 o'clock or almost. Do you want to break for lunch, or do you want to continue? What is the pleasure of the board?
We're almost
15
done.
more minutes, see what happens.
We're almost done.
We finished?
Then we're done for the day, right?
Once we get past commissioner comments and so
Go
forth.
to 1 o'clock and
Finish it
just
for the
end, go
day?
to 1 o'clock and be through.
I'm sorry?
We can continue to go to 1 o'clock and be.
It's up to the board.
And
I'm
then
okay
just
with
be
going.
done for the day.
Okay, all right, then we will continue. Commissioner Whitmore.
Well, I live on the island. I would love to have tax credits for my private property. So we need to look at that. But Robin brought up some good points about where she is exactly at her mom's condo and what she's seeing around her. And that's the wave that really we need to start looking at. From what Mr. Marshall said, we have a plan, and we will have guidelines. It's not like it's willy-nilly. There are strict guidelines, and if they don't meet them, they don't fall under this criteria. This has been very public for years now, years. And Mr. Marshall was actually at our meetings when we went page by page, and the late Mr. Wheeler was too. So, you know, it has been open to the public. Only a few of you brave souls actually sat through most of it, so we appreciate that. There is a public hearing, and we made it at 6 p.m. so that the public can come, and that's the 15th. So we did that so that we could get public input. The comment about protecting the people and not the developers, that is not what this is about. The people have asked for this. Maybe not some of us like me that have, you know, lived here a long time, but our citizens are asking for this. They want to go to other places, and you've heard this regarding these major developments that have come before us that have a different urban type planning and stuff. And they said, you know, this area, we're tired. We do need to think outside of the box. So I don't put this as the people protecting against developers. I actually think it's us against, I'm hearing us against them, but no, it's we. And the development community has input, the citizens have input. We've had tons of citizen input. This is what we're asking. And we always hear change is hard. We could still keep doing all these developments with 200 or 300 or 400 homes spread out, and everybody has to mow their lawns and all that. That's not, you know, I'm selling my house and I'm looking for something like this. It won't be built when I want it, but, you know, I'm done with the big house and all that. I want something where my husband and I can do what we want, walk where we want to go, and not have to travel everywhere to go somewhere. So, and my family does too. They're the millenniums. So, you know, it's not us against them, it's we. And we have the community has asked for this. And that's where we are today, and that's why it's taken so long, because we did get so much input. So I totally support this, just like Robin does, and I hope we start moving forward on this today.
Commissioner Benet.
Yeah, the developers have not asked for this.
Not at all.
The developers didn't even participate when we had this. This is not their baby. This is an idea that is being proposed throughout the country to try to protect agricultural land, to try to protect existing neighborhoods, to try to bring some life back into the abandoned areas of the county. The developers would just much rather go out east, develop it. And you know what? I say this all the time. People are going to continue to move here to Manatee County. How do we accommodate them? Do we expand our urban service boundary and just say, yeah, let's just keep developing east? Or do we focus, very focused on the urban corridor? I look at your letter, and your letter says, which I agree, that we need to protect the existing residential business and the agriculture community and the environment of this county. This is the way to do it. This is the way to get redevelopment in the urban core where we already have mass areas of paved over parking lots that are so underutilized. And there's no stormwater management in those areas. This is a way to retrofit. You know, this is the way to bring in grants to retrofit and protect our bays, to change those areas, to bring in green space. You know, so I agree with you. I just don't think that you understand that that is the purpose of this. And how are we going to get those developers interested in that? The only way to do this is to have incentives. You know, we've heard time and time again about how this is not their deal. They don't want to do it. We had the work session on affordable housing. Can't make it work. But the urban core, I was at Bear Shore Gardens and someone appealed to me saying, look at these houses that we have here. They're affordable, but the neighborhoods are not safe. People don't want to live in these affordable. This is a way to make it more safe. That is what all the studies show, that if you can bring more people into the urban core, people that are willing to live and invest there, it will make the neighborhoods around there more safe. I know that it's very scary because it's so very different, and I understand that. But today, we don't have mandatory pre-apps. Today, we don't have mandatory neighborhood meetings. The developers that don't do them, in my book, are kind of, they're not doing the right thing. They're not going to have a leg up. The smart developers always do all of those things. And with these very complicated incentives, They're going to have to come in and understand what's doing. But that is not something new. We're not giving up any authority that we have today. That authority does not exist in the code today. This was just a clarification of what is in staff. I mean, I'm going from memory back when I used to do this work. It's still not required to have a
That's correct. Lisa Barrett with staff. I just wanted to clarify too, that's in the county-wide changes, agenda item number 8, not in the urban corridor changes. So this is just something we are clarifying with the reorg that we did last year.
Right, but we're just clarifying it. Today, they're not required to have a pre-app, nor are they required to have a neighborhood meeting. So that's,
Correct. We encourage them and
we encourage them
they are to the
today,
developers.
and that's the standard that's just going to be reflected the way it is today. We haven't changed that standard. You know, again, anybody who, you know, wants to figure out how to do this is going to have to come in and ask a lot of questions. So I truly believe that this will, in fact, protect our agricultural areas. You know, if we can get people interested, and these urban corridors are very limited. The map is very limited. They don't touch any agricultural lands. They're not jeopardizing it. But if we can get people that want to move into these urban areas, into redevelopment areas, in areas that we can provide all the urban services without having to go further out east, then I think it will, in fact, meet the objectives that you stated in your letter. But it's just an incentive. It's really just an incentive. We don't have any way to make people do this because, you know, they own the property they can develop under the current land development code standards. But we're doing this as an incentive to try to get a different development pattern, which has worked elsewhere. And you know, all these ideas about tax abatement and things, I mean, that's going to be Jerry's. She's going to have to bring those forward. She's going to have to bring ideas that have worked elsewhere, that have worked to be able to encourage the redevelopment. This is just the tools to get us started in the land development code. And the comp plan, you know, you're absolutely right. The comp plan provisions are where people can, you know, you can fight a comp plan change, absolutely. But this is not a comp plan change. This is a land development code change. This is implementing the comp plan changes that are already done. So, right? Comp plan changes are done? Yeah. Okay. Are you done? Yes, sorry. Okay. It was good. Try to clarify.
Commissioner Smith.
Wow. Mr. Marshall, I hear what you're saying, and I will revisit the map. But at the same time, I must be cautious because as I see the urban core now, you're dealing with no investments in those areas. You're dealing with poverty, career poverty. You're dealing with crime. Generations of families are suffering. No one's pulling permits, very minimum permits. Law enforcement in the city of Bradenton and parts in the sheriff department increased patrolling, got prostitution taking place. You have all these different issues taking place. So no one wants to invest in that community because of bad risk, and I don't blame them. And I'd like you to schedule a 30-minute meeting with me, too, and kind of educate me on what you have. But I'm going to tell you what my concerns is what you said. As I see it right now, and I will revisit the map, that if we allow for the urban core, these communities where generations have not had the opportunity to move out because they couldn't financially afford it, too poor to do it, and continue to live in those atmospheres, as you stated, that we represent the public, and we are representing the public. These are the ones that can't afford to get into a mortgage and can't afford to move out. If we allow what you mentioned today for people who are not in the urban core to have the ability to come here, who may be living in $1 million mansion, and start telling us we don't want that to take place there in that community, we want crime and violence to keep going, and the sheriff keep asking for deputies, and they come and dictate that and still leave 6-10 miles out into the suburbs and keep this nonsense going. We wouldn't have a tool to compete with that. This is a start with it. It's better than what it was when I got here. I mean, they're working on this, Mr. Bernard, his staff, and all the parties that participated with this, are laying this foundation. So I encourage you to schedule an appointment with me. Let me see what you're saying. But for me, when I hear people crying out for investments, jobs, opportunity, I see land there that no one will rent, no one will invest any money into it. Developers are telling me it's a bad deal. They're not running to this urban core to invest anything. So to encourage them to look and revitalize these communities, because we can't afford it, we need incentives for them to do that. So I really don't want to set up something where the people who are in the urban core that want to better themselves, who wants development, want the house rebuilt and things like that, have an opportunity to do that. But I'm very cautious about someone that don't live in the urban core would have the ability to come and pack a commission chambers and say we don't want those individuals to improve the quality of life. And that's where I'm at right now, but you can educate me now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good points. I'm next on the board, and I just have a couple of questions for the public. After the second meeting on November the 15th, what's the procedure after that? How long would it take to basically be ready to be able to move forward?
Madam Chair, the ordinance would be signed by the chair and then go to the state, so approximately a week.
Okay.
And they would be effective.
So a week or so before it would actually go in effect after the second meeting on November the 15th?
Correct.
Which is being done at 6 o'clock in the evening for the public,
It is.
as
yes.
this one was?
Yes.
Okay. I think my fellow Commissioner Smith and Commissioner Benak hit it pretty well on the nose. When I heard the term developer-friendly, that is just not the case. And I wonder where that influence is coming from. It's not developer-friendly. It is friendly to try and increase the urban core, to make things better, to increase the property values, to make it a better quality of life for the citizens in that area. To say that it's developer-friendly is just way off base, in my opinion. I can tell you, I wouldn't even think that the developers would be eager to even look at it. So, I just think that, I don't know where that influence is coming from, but I think it's off base in this regard. It's really to help the quality of life for those in that area, to increase property values, to make things better. It has nothing to do with developers or being developer-friendly. That bothers me to hear that. And Mr. Marshall, I think you and I can tell you, in my briefing on this, I asked the question, why can't we make this mandatory? I want to see these things now. And that being said, in time, you will see it that way. We're just trying to move slowly so as not to hurt the economy in Manatee County today. But these are very good changes that we're looking at, and I think they're going to be very productive, and I think they're going to be very positive. So that's my thought on this subject. Commissioner Benak.
And there was a planning commission hearing
Yes.
on this, right?
Yes.
Yes, Madam Chair. Approximately about a year ago, too, we had a neighborhood workshop at a library where the public attended. We had a joint work session, actually 2 joint work sessions, and then another follow-up neighborhood meeting at the Central Library in, I think, April of last year, which Mr. Marshall did attend.
That's right. I remember going to that meeting at the library, and I remember seeing Mr. Marshall was there. So I think there has been a lot of attendance in discussion, and I get it. Not everybody, this kind of stuff is kind of detailed. Not everybody gets it, but that's what I thought. And the Planning Commission approved this unanimously? Is that correct?
Yes, I believe, yes.
Planning Commission, because I know those folks do a good job. Knowing the people that are on the Planning Commission, they do a very good job of delving into a lot of questions and take public comment as well, so.
And also, the information has been on our website, the specific language, since probably April of this year.
Oh, this language has been on
Yes.
the website for almost
Well,
half a year now.
Since April.
Well, I don't even know what month it is. November. hard to tell what month it is in Florida.
It's so
November.
busy.
Madam Chair, just so I don't forget to, I entered into the public record another public comment letter that was received this morning, so.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other comments, commissioners?
Yes.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, it's great discussion, and I just wanted to say there was a time that I was down in the Bads area, and I walked by a meeting that was going on, which was a pre-app meeting, and to me that was such a benefit that the county offers, because you had all the different departments in one room at the same time. It saved the applicant time and money from going to department, and that was, I think, a great tool that we offer. And also, I love Mr. Marshall, and I love all that they do, and I just want to make this a win-win, that we are being friendly to all businesses and developers who want to invest in this endeavor and want to revitalize the urban core. We don't want to be, how would I put it? We don't want to discourage anyone from coming in. So we want to encourage, and that's the point of all this. So again, great job, and motion to approve.
Second. And I agree with everything that Commissioner DeSabatino just said.
Me too.
Me too. All right, we have a motion to approve by Commissioner DeSabatino, a second by Commissioner Benak, and
Madam Chair,
You have-
we just need to clarify which ordinance
Yeah.
we're doing here. We had the public hearings together. The first ordinance in number 8 is ordinance 1624, LDC text amendment.
actually, we don't need a motion,
Oh,
that's
okay.
correct.
Okay.
This is just a public hearing.
All right, yeah.
Right.
All right. Agree with you.
Threw me off, Robin.
Agree with the idea.
I know. I was just seeing if you were paying attention.
Evidently not. Put it on me instead of yourself, that's good. Commissioner,
All right.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bonner.
Thank you. To wrap this up from the staff standpoint and move on with business, all the pieces of the puzzle are starting to come together. With Jerry coming on board, with Complete Streets, with the urban corridor change, with the countywide changes, with the work session coming up in December. Commissioner Benak said, we got studies that go back into the 90s, and we pulled all of those together. I think the only one that remembers every study by heart is John Osborne. You can ask him back in, whatever, and I remember that study. It's a very difficult task for Building Development Services, along with our partners, to pull this together. We're currently doing approximately 30% more than the staffs have in the past with half the employees that they had. Plus, we're rewriting the Land Development Code, the comprehensive plan. Going to make a move to 2 new operating systems. I can't tell you how much time and effort has been spent by your staff, my colleagues, on getting all this done. And nobody realizes that. County Administrator and I had a discussion about that last week, and he knows. So, thank you for listening to us today and the understanding. Somebody said a win-win for all. That's what we're out for.
Thank you. All right, well, I don't have anyone else on the board, so this will come back before us again, a public hearing, November the 15th at 6 o'clock. Thank you. And that concludes our agenda, so we're going to move now into commissioner comments.
Shoot, I have some.
You done?
Fine.
Commissioner Bussell had to leave, he had a meeting.
Leave.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah, he had a meeting. So Commissioner Smith, you don't have anything, sir?
No, Madam Chair, thank you. I will save my comments for the next meeting.
All right, Commissioner Benak.
just want to say to everybody, let's just pray for a safe and fair election. That's all I've got to say about that.
Commissioner Whitmore?
Just a couple quick things. I'd like, John is still here. I think we individually need an update on what's going on with Legends Bay and the Lombard issue. It's what we read in the paper. So when you did send an email, you said you were you were investigating. So just to keep us informed so we know what's going on.
We
County
will.
attorney's looking into that, right?
And also, don't forget the RAM thing. It's the 10th, 11th, 12th, and 13th?
Friday, Saturday, and
And
Sunday.
So one of
And
them's.
Thursday's the animals.
Oh, so it is 4 days. Okay, so you have to go online to register, or you won't be able to go in the door. And I know Betsy had talked about it, doing it, and you have to register, because I did, and I'm on a waiting list, but you need to. All right, and I just wanted to mention 2 former county commissioners have been under the weather, Pat Glass and Gwen Brown, and they are recuperating, but they are legends of this county, and I just want to say that we all have our thoughts with them, and that's all.
All right, Commissioner DiSabatino?
No, thank you. Thanks for setting this up. I appreciated you letting me attend by phone. My mother is much, much better, and I will be back in the county tomorrow afternoon. And for the record again, I listened to and watched the entire meeting and reviewed all the documents. Thank you.
You've been through this before, haven't you?
Girl.
Yeah.
A few times.
It's good to know that it works, that you can see everything watching it on your iPad, so.
Got a Skype, yeah.
And it's really good news to hear about your mom, too. Commissioner Smith, did you have something to add, sir?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just wanted to comment on Commissioner Whitmore dealing with our former county commissioners, and I don't know if the county administrator had mentioned this to me, or maybe she had, but maybe the county administrator. You know, we were talking about some kind of way finding out how to bring all the former county commissioners with some kind of recognition ceremony or some kind of hand food thing, maybe on every other year or something like that, and we haven't done it. I know we talked about it when we're doing our facility out there with the water dam, of doing that. And you know, I think that's something we need to do, the ones that's surviving, because, you know, they're getting to the point now where they're going to start passing out. And, you know, we need to remember those that served, and, you know, from that standpoint. And I just want to comment on that the ones that served, I think it should be some, you know, every 2 or 3 years that was on this board, that we bring them back. I just want to put that on the floor.
Good idea.
I'll go ahead at this point and mention, too, that Commissioner-elect Trace is in the audience, and it's my understanding that the swearing-in ceremony will take place November the 21st at 9 o'clock in this room, I believe.
It's a Monday,
Yeah.
the 21st,
They moved it.
Yeah, it's been moved. 21st? 21st.
Not the 22nd.
not the 22nd.
Not the 22nd.
Thank you for announcing
21st.
that.
So that'll be an interesting morning.
It's just that, though, right?
Yeah, it's just that. There's no meeting or
I thought I was
anything.
missing something.
No.
The new commissioners actually officially take their positions the 22nd, but you can be sworn in any time after the election, is what I found out.
Yeah. It's really just
Formality.
Just
Commissioner
make sure it's
Chaffee?
legal.
Yes, I'm not sure, I don't believe I'm going to be around for the further discussion with regards to a pool, or the type of pool facility and location. But I think it would be an interesting exercise if staff could gather some information with regards to the developments that have already taken place north of the river, and which ones have the amenities such as the pool in their own communities. I know I did a quick Google map of several of them, and there was one actually that had 8 lanes in a pool that was provided for the development. So, you know, it's important, I feel, that, you know, it's about the users. You know, who's going to be who needs it? Who's the users that really need this facility? So I would just hope that maybe that we could get that bit of information for the commissioners who will be sit in office, blah, so that they can further discuss the best, most effective and most needed area for a site for the pool. Thank you.
Is that all you have?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Chappie, I couldn't agree with you more. I've been looking into that actually myself. You know, because, you know, it's been pointed out, I mean, the county, we don't build pools every day, so we need to make sure that we do this right. And, you know, the right thing is to make sure that we're helping as many citizens that, in my opinion, that don't have access to a pool today. So it'll be interesting to see when we have our workshop how that all pans out, and who knows, you might not be sitting with us as a sitting commissioner, but you probably will be
In the audience.
from Bradenton Beach, and you can still come to the meeting. So, that being said, I don't have anything else.
I wish you the best of luck.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
me
I
too.
do,
Both
yeah,
of you.
yeah, but I just want, yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I keep forgetting, I'm so sick of watching the news. I watched the Hallmark Channel, I was so sick of it the other day.
Christmas stories.
All that, yeah, anything but politics.
I watch the Weather Channel.
Yeah.
I just listen to music.
Commissioner, thank you, but
Mr. Barnhart.
I think my staff is already doing what Commissioner Chappie asked for.
Good.
But I want to be clear that you want to know the number of pools with amenity centers in North County.
The developments that have taken place out there, the ones that have already been built, the newer ones, relatively, these
That have a
developments.
community pool
That have community pools
For their development?
for their developments,
Okay.
in North County.
north of the river.
Okay, so I'm not counting swimming pools in people's backyards.
I think that's important too, though.
No.
No.
No, that's different.
No, I, absolutely not.
Okay.
Oh, good, then we can look at Lakewood Ranch. Oh,
It's not North County.
oh,
North
close
of the
enough.
river.
If you look at impact phase. Close enough. Anything else, Mr. Barnott?
No.
It's a separate thing. You wouldn't know about that, never mind. All right, well, nothing else being said or nothing else before us except Election Day on Tuesday. Everybody needs to vote. And good luck to our two commissioners sitting up here. This meeting's adjourned.